Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Ashland Board of Selectmen meeting for March 21st. Is there anyone here that is recording these proceedings other than WACA-TV? Okay. All right. So I will ask to, let's see. Joe, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
We seem to be
Thank you,
missing Cub
Mr.
Scouts. So.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Carl, would you like to read the vision statement for the town?
Sure. Vision statement. The town of Ashland will be a prosperous and fiscally sound community with a full range of housing, business, cultural, educational, and recreational opportunities in a safe and attractive environment for residents and visitors.
Okay. Mission statement. Steve?
Sure. Mission statement. The Ashland Board of Selectmen is dedicated to promoting responsible fiscal management, advocating for sustainable development and growth, and providing excellent municipal services which will enhance the quality of life in our diverse community. The Ashland Board of Selectmen is committed to providing clear goals and objectives for town management and creating effective engagement and public participation with residents, state legislators, and other elected officials in order to achieve our mission.
Great. Thank you. So anyone here for citizens participation? Hearing none, no one's here. So we have to wait till 7:15 is my understanding for the hearing.
We need to wait until
So
7:15.
is there
Consent agenda.
suggestions for the consent agenda? So I will read the,
They have it to put up today, Rob.
I'm just looking at,
There it is.
very good, that was quick, all right. So as we go down the consent agenda, is there any of the board members wish to pull anything off the consent agenda?
Nope.
All right, I will then, and as, I would just ask people to note the resignation of Jessica Paddleford and Tom McNulty, who have served on committees, and we certainly thank them for their service to the town. So I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
The consent agenda have been motioned and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Consent agenda is accepted. Thank you. Okay. So, one thing Mike's looking at me like he wants to say something, but
Well,
go ahead.
I was just suggesting if you wanted to move along in the agenda, we could probably cover town manager reports in the 10
Sure.
minutes between
And
the hearings.
before I do that, and anybody, I just want to briefly mention, and people feel free to chime in, the big news about Senator Spilka, our senator and Ashland resident, who has pretty much publicly announced that she has the votes to become president of the Massachusetts Senate, which is really a big deal, and our congratulations to her. I think it'll be great for her and for this community. So I think that's fitting to note at the beginning of our meeting, while people may still be watching us, so. it's good. Anybody else want to comment on that, or?
I was going to make a comment with respect
Sure.
to board reports, but
Yeah.
then I'll hold off till then.
Save that, okay.
That's fine.
All right, Michael, go ahead.
Sure. So, first, under town manager reports, wanted to let you know and publicly notify the town that Ashland was the recipient yesterday of a Massachusetts Downtown Initiative grant from the Baker-Polito administration. It's a $15,000 grant to look at the feasibility of establishing what's known as a business improvement district in downtown. The business improvement district is a region or an area within the town. In this case, it would be downtown with the borders to be determined, where businesses themselves would actually fund improvements within the downtown area and improvements into their streetscape and into some of their own their own land and storefronts. And it's a really good opportunity to capitalize on the potential of a public-private partnership, as we start making investments as a community and as a town into, downtown and streetscape enhancements and things like that, gives them an opportunity to participate in that as well. So, again, this would be looking at the feasibility of it, what the economics of that would look like. And so, again, we're really grateful for the Baker-Polito administration for recognizing us and awarding us that grant. So more information about the process will be forthcoming.
Great, thank you.
Next, continuing on the downtown forum, downtown theme, we'll be having our second downtown forum next Thursday. Doors will open at 6:30 p.m. for those who want to come. It's at the community center. We'll have a presentation starting at 7 p.m. and this is going to be an opportunity. So what BSC, our engineering firm, has done is they've taken the feedback from the initial forum that we had, also some of the feedback that they've received from like the website Co-Urbanize. They've developed several different alternatives for Main Street and Front Street and the streetscapes. Things like bike lanes, parking, expanded sidewalks, street trees, placemaking aspects as well. So it'll give the public an opportunity to see those and identify the things that they like about each of them and the things that they perhaps don't like about each of them. And at that point, BSC will then take all of that information, put it together into a final design. So we're looking forward to that. Again, 6:30 next Thursday at the community center. Also at the community center tomorrow, for those that don't know, we'll be having a senior resource roundtable starting at 1 o'clock, again at the community center. It's going to be an opportunity for our seniors to get some information about the programs the town of Ashland offers, and then also some non-town of Ashland assistance that they might be eligible for and they might be able to take advantage of. So we've been talking about doing something like this for a few years. It's nice to actually be able to do it and pull it off. Really want to express my thanks to Kim over at the community center and Joanne and Kara and Jennifer for really starting to, really putting this together. And then
Michael, I have a question for you. With regard to the downtown forum, is there a target date for when that will actually be implemented? Do we have a target date for that?
No, so the steps that would happen is, so after this forum, again, BSC would put together like a final design. We would unveil that to the public probably towards the end of the summer and take some feedback on that, maybe make some small tweaks. Then we would need to go to the next stage of engineering, which would be the 75 and 100% design marks, which for this area, in terms of square footage, probably is going to take 6 to 9 months. And then at that point, we can start the work of implementation and things like that. But with the final design and the 25% design, that gives us the opportunity to apply for grants and to apply to other outside funding sources that we might be able to utilize to do the project.
Okay, so we're looking for about a year out?
Year and a half before we start breaking ground. So
Thanks.
I think that's safer. And then finally, I just wanted to let you know that we have finally developed our employee handbook and policies and procedures manual. Greg Enos, our HR director, has put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, compiling all this, working with different employees, working with different collective bargaining units to talk about it. And right now, this applies solely. All of this would apply solely to non-union personnel. We're in the process of talking about implementing some of the pieces in for our unionized workers. But again, it gives us an opportunity. It finally codifies a lot of the things that we've been talking about. So it's nice to see this finally get put together. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Yolanda.
About how many employees does that impact, that personnel policy?
So it would be, once everybody is covered under the policy, 125 to 150.
So no, the current, so non-union, what is it currently?
I'd say it was probably 40. I don't know right off the top of my head.
Okay.
So But covers everything like leave and, you know, sexual harassment. It really provides us some protection in terms of, as a community, and at least sets out the expectations for our employees.
So these just non-union personnel
For right now,
for right now? Okay.
yeah.
And then the goal is to, as you do new contracts, get the language included, or at least
Correct.
the manual included.
Correct.
As
Great.
part of the CBD,
Nice.
okay.
So,
What is our contract schedule looking like? coming up? I
so
know
we've started, they're going to expire this year, June 30th. So we've started talking and setting like ground rules and, you know, figuring out that schedule of what we're
For all
gonna
of
do.
them expiring at
Yeah.
the same time?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we,
Wow.
you know, it was on like a staggered schedule. Some person had the really bright idea of, it'd be a lot more efficient if you put them all on the same schedule.
There's a reason for it not being all the
Yeah,
same
and
schedule.
we're finding that out, so, but yeah, we're stuck with doing it all on the same schedule now.
Yeah, so this, yeah, what were you saying about the schedule in terms of discussions and things like that leading up to it?
So we'll, I mean, you set up individualized dates with each of them, and, so the goal is to have them done by June 30th.
Yeah.
Obviously. You know, what we've done in the budget was we've set aside a certain amount of funding, you know, for any type of adjustments that need to be made to the collective bargaining agreements, so that, you know, in FY19, we'll be able to make those adjustments. So,
And who's on the team that will be doing the discussion, I guess, negotiation?
it's myself and Greg. This time around, we are not utilizing the attorneys at the very beginning. You know, we made a conscious decision to try to hammer the aspects of a deal out ahead of time, and then, you know, once we get towards the finish line, you know, submitting those to our respective attorneys to make sure that they're finalized and all in proper legal order. We just felt that, first of all, having the attorneys in the room right at the very beginning kind of sets a tone that's not, you know, no offense to any attorneys here. So it just sets a
You haven't
tone.
finished your sentence.
Yeah, it just sets a tone.
He was looking right at you.
Yeah,
I could tell.
and it's also cheaper. You
Yeah,
know,
no, that's, we certainly use
efficient.
them. Yeah, okay, very good.
It is.
Are there any issues you care to highlight it? I know some things you can't, I mean, other than money, is there any kind of,
No, I mean, there's a
kind of
couple
things.
of language tweaks I think we need to, you know, look at. You know, I think, you know, anytime you open up a contract, you know, you're looking at things like benefits, and you're looking at, you know, let's just take vacation days for example. You know, there's a couple of different ways to think about them, and first is, you know, you want to maintain a competitive workplace environment, and so if your salaries are not necessarily, you know, comparable to the surrounding communities, you know, if you have a little bit more generous, you know, benefit time or paid time off, you know, that could make up for that. At the same time, if you have too much of that paid time off, then you have to think about, well, you know, especially with things like police and fire, you have to backfill those positions. So there's a cost associated with that.
so you think some of that you're reviewing? Okay.
Yep.
All
Good
right.
timing.
You got it to
That's very
7:15.
good.
You
Yes,
got
I
it.
think
So-
I did. Okay. So it being close enough to 7:15, I'm going to announce a public hearing and on a dangerous dog hearing. The Ashland Board of Selectmen, I'm required to read this statement. The Ashland Board of Selectmen will conduct a hearing pursuant to General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157, and Section 87-16 of the town's general bylaws to determine whether a dog identified as Remy is a, quote, dangerous dog as defined by Chapter 140, Section 136A. Okay, so I'm going to, in terms of this process, just ask our animal control officer to come and give us the background and explain the reason for this hearing. You should know, the board has received a number of documentations, the order, various orders, and witness and statements and complaints. So go ahead, Brianna.
No? Okay. That we have.
That would be great.
So on Monday, February 19th, 2018, the first incident occurred at 8 Charles Street. The dog from 8 Charles Street came running from the backyard across the street to where Mr. Leary was trying to get his dog back under control.
Excuse
after
me, Brianna, could you
Brianna?
just identify yourself?
I'm
and-
sorry, I'm
Go ahead.
Brianna Gladio. I'm the animal control officer.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Leary was trying to get his dog back under control after his dog ran up the street with Mr. Leary chasing after him. The dog from 8 Charles Street and Mr. Leary's dog got into an altercation in which Mr. Leary said he was bitten by a dog from 8 Charles Street. Mr. Leary received several punctures and required stitches. Officer Brianna Gladio handled the initial investigation and handed out the necessary citations and quarantine order. The dog was quarantined for 10 days, which was up on March 1st. On February 28th, we received a call in the office of a second incident which occurred on Tri Street, where the Ozanian's dog Remy, already under quarantine, got loose again, ran up to Tri Street to a woman walking a small dog. It was reported in the email from Angela Lawson. She lives at number 7 Tri Street. That the woman was screaming and holding her dog in the air while Remy was continue to jump on her and to get her dog. Dog owner never came forward, but Shannon McDonald went up to try to stop Remy and bring him back home with much difficulty, which the dog went back and jumped up, and the woman again tried to get the dog. After the second incident, we got another complaint via email from the next door neighbor, Maureen Roberti of Charles Street, of the dog Remy repeatedly getting loose and running the neighborhood. She stated her concerns in the email. ACO Donna Walsh had occasions to speak with Colin Ozanian and Shannon McDonald at the kennel when they showed up looking to speak with her after she had been to the house looking to speak with them. She needed to cite them for Remy getting loose a second time. Officer Donna Walsh had Officer Kavanaugh present at the time of the meeting. She went back to the house to release Remy's quarantine issue citation later that evening with Officer Girardi. Donna Walsh explained during the meeting that they would need immediately to contain Remy with a cable or fence to ensure he does not get loose anymore. Their main complaint was that their dog was not a biting dog and that they did not want him to have a history. They said their neighbor's dog was discriminating against their dog because it was a pit bull. They will be contesting the citation for nuisance animal by way of vicious disposition in Framingham District Court because they contest that their dog bit Mr. Leary. The recommendations that both I and Donna Walsh which spoke at length to Colin Ozanian and Shannon McDonald about how we can rectify the situation. I asked them to come up with a plan to keep the dog on their property and not to consider that the dog has the right to get to the other side of the street, which is also their property. By doing this, the dog is now able to get to wherever he wants, scaring the neighbors and risks having another altercation or injury to a person or another animal. I told them that I think there was a misunderstanding with friendliness for dominance. Remy is possibly a dominant dog and makes his presence known through the neighborhood. This in turn is a problem with the neighbors. I believe that this can be remedied by ordering them to keep the dog on their property either with a cable as long as they follow the tethering law by not keeping the dog out for extended periods of time and to provide shelter for the elements and water at all time. The other would be ordering a fenced-in area for the dog to be in. These are only as good as the owner is willing to be diligent in making sure that the dog is secure at all times. It's extremely important that they understand that they need to make sure this happens with no other incidents occurring so that other neighbors feel secure. To this date, we have received no complaints since the meeting on Remy being loose from the neighbors. We did get a report from Shannon McDonald that Mr. Leary's dog was loose again last week with him chasing him again, and he got the dog though. I have sent Mr. Leary an email asking him to also come up with a plan to keep his dog from getting loose and getting into any altercations. Both dogs are licensed since this incident.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board for Brianna about this? So your recommendation, if I could just, that the dog be restrained through some
Restrained.
sort of method, and you think, and when you discussed this with them, they had agreed to that? Is that?
Yes. Yep, it just needs to be restrained, either with, if they can't do it with tethering the dog, and there needs to be a fence. Keep the dog contained, just for the safety of the neighborhood.
Question. Just for my clarification, so we're being asked to determine whether or not Remy is a dangerous dog, and then there's also these recommendations, so how do
Right.
these fit together here?
So first of all, you want to determine whether or not it's a dangerous dog or a nuisance dog, and correct me if I'm wrong. And then, upon that determination, you need to determine if it is, a nuisance dog, what type of measures you would like to implement and put in place to, rectify that situation.
So what's the implications of saying the dog is a dangerous dog? Does that then, we then have a separate set of actions that would be then taken? That's, I guess I'm
Yeah.
just wondering, under this,
Yeah, can I
Sure.
address that real
yeah,
quickly? There is, animal control can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a defined series of steps for a dangerous dog as opposed to what would be called a nuisance dog. If the dog is considered a nuisance, there's still steps we can take, and they might overlap with that series of dangerous dog steps because it does include tethering and restraining and fencing or whatever it might be. So I think, to go to the chair's point, we have to determine first whether it's a vicious dog or a dangerous dog, and we can make a better determination. So I think it's important from your perspective to tell us what the way you view this.
I don't see the dog as being dangerous per se. If they follow, tethering the dog, getting a fence for their dog, I think it'll avoid, deeming the dog dangerous. I think containing the dog would make that not have to, go further with that. I think that's the biggest thing, is the dog can't be off leash, running around the neighborhood.
all right, thank you, Brianna, okay?
Can I follow that up?
Sure.
So in your mind, it's more of a nuisance,
More of a nuisance.
to the specifics, dangerous versus nuisance, it's a
Right.
nuisance issue.
I mean, it definitely could turn into a dangerous
Dangerous.
dog if
Correct.
they don't follow,
Okay.
tethering the dog, but.
And
Joe?
the only incident that actually occurred where there was some minor injury that happened to Mr. Leary was on the 23rd of February, where he.
No.
where
On
his
the
son was
19th.
injured.
That was when Mr. Leary got bit and also his dog.
Okay, but
There
that
was
was
certain-
by,
But there was also the second
But there was a
incident with
second
the woman and
offense,
her dog.
yes.
right, okay.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask then if there's no other questions for Brianna, I'm going to ask Colin Ozanian and Shannon McDonald to come forward. Hi. So go ahead and just want to say your name and then just tell us what you want, make a statement or tell us your response to this.
Okay, my name is Shannon McDonald. I brought some pictures of our dog so you guys could see who we were talking about.
You just
So,
pass them,
kind of
yeah.
pass those down.
Sure.
You want to just leave them at one end and
Yeah,
then
we'll,
pass them all
we'll
down?
work 'em-
Yeah,
yeah,
that'd be
we'll
easier
just pass them
than
down.
trying to get to us.
It's a bigger table than I thought it was gonna be.
It's big.
So, I don't know where you want me to start. You want me to start with what happened with Mr. Lear's
Well,
dog, or with?
Maybe,
how
I'm
our
sure
dog is
people
in
can ask
general?
questions, but I think if you just confirm, the animal control officer has made certain recommendations, and I
Right,
think
that the
you
dogs
should
stay leashed.
respond to that, maybe rather than get into a long
Okay.
narrative about who may have done what. Maybe that
We are
would be more
totally fine with
constructive.
following the leash restraint. We've been following it since the incident with Mr. Leary. The incident with the lady was an accident. Remy had previously been allowed to be off leash if he was in the yard with my husband. That's no longer been allowed. So we are following that recommendation.
And was that the case when?
When
you-
he ran down the street? No. I had gone out to my car to grab my phone charger from my car, and when I shut the door behind me, it didn't shut all the way. Remy stuck his head out of the door, and he saw the lady walking her dog. He ran up to the lady. As you can imagine, if my large dog had been attacking this woman and her dog, there would have been a problem. He was jumping. He was excited. I got him under control quickly. The lady was very scared. We were very apologetic for that. But she was not hurt at all. Her dog was not hurt at all. I brought Remy back to the house. I came down and I talked to her for about 20 minutes because she was really scared. Like I said, my dog was big. He is big, and he was jumping, so it was scary for her. But she definitely wasn't hurt at all.
I'm sorry, if I may, my name's Colin
Sure.
Ozanian. I own the
Make
dog.
sure you speak into the microphone.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I own the dog, and when I brought the dog into the house, I took full responsibility because of the fact that I was raised up with big dogs, and I have a passion for them. And my daughter was bit by a Rottweiler when she was 2, and that made a big impact on my family and between my wife and I, and me able to get, a dog of my, what I would prefer in a dog. And growing up with the dogs and, having one bite my daughter when she was young made it very difficult for me to not only bring the dog into the house, but, I went through a long road to get that dog behaved where he is today. And I would not let him run off leash, and I would not, put the neighbors in danger if I thought that he had it in him at all to cause anybody harm. He doesn't. He's social. I have I have friends with dogs, and he's fine with all the other dogs, even though he looks very aggressive. He's not. He's a softie, he's a big teddy bear, so that's all. I don't believe he bit anybody. My dog had a lot of bite marks on him from the other dog, but I don't recollect that there was any bite marks on the other dog at all.
The vet report from the other dog doesn't mention any bite marks either. And the vet report from our dog does specifically say that they were punctures and bites, so.
Okay, I'm going to open this up to questions. All right, Carl, you want to start?
Is it Mr. Ozanian, is that how you pronounce it? So you're suggesting that Mr. Leary was bitten by his own dog?
I think maybe he didn't see who really bit him, but if anything, there's a possibility that maybe there was a bump, but I don't know. I didn't have any proof. Nobody came to me and showed me any proof of anything of what happened.
So referred digression is pretty common, especially with new dogs, like Chase is new to their house. So sometimes if a dog is snapping at something and you grab him to pull him back, they turn and snap instinctively.
Remy is very gentle with food, with hands, fingers. I have a 3-year-old, can give him treats. He's very gentle, So I don't believe it was him that bit the hand. I believe that it was his own dog, regardless of of judgment anywhere.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Others? Steve?
So, just to clarify one thing, in the report from the animal control officer said you're contesting the citations?
Yes.
What-
We're consistent the
The bite.
bite citation. We paid the other citations.
Okay, so-
But since we don't believe that our dog bit Mr. Leary or his dog,
Okay. Were you present at that time?
I was right
Yeah.
behind
No.
Remy. Yes, I was present.
You were present when the dogs,
Yes, and I ran in, I pulled my dog away, and Chase was still consistently biting Remy as I was pulling him
Okay.
away.
so I'm sure you have to understand, regardless of how calm or how good-natured your animal is, you have to realize
I
certainly
understand
that there is a
we're at
stigma
fault.
there, right? No, I'm just saying, there
Well,
is a
because he got
stigma
up,
about
but-
the breed that you need to be sensitive about. Unfortunately, and I know, I know a lot of no pit bulls that are, as you described them, they're great pets. So I'm not going to get on a soapbox about pit bulls, but I'm saying you need to be sensitive that there is a stigma out there.
I understand
right?
that he's scary
So-
looking, yes.
So that being said, you know, you're familiar with our bylaw
For the leashes?
for leashes, right?
Yes.
And,
I
no
think we were a
person,
little hairy about where, because on your own property, you're allowed to not have to
it
leash.
says clearly, you know, no person who owns or keeps a dog shall allow the animal to run free when not restricted to the premises of said owner. Now, it says restricted,
Right.
right? Now, that can mean a number of things. Said owner or keeper, when off said premises, such dog shall be leashed and curbed, right? So, understanding that, you're prepared to take the recommendations of the animal control officer in terms of
Yes.
tethering, in terms of, and I know you own the property across the street
Yes.
as well. So if you want to take your dog across the street, it needs to be on a leash, correct?
Right.
I
So,
understand.
so you're aware that needs to be done. And if you're going to keep them out there for an extended period of time,
Which we don't.
We don't.
okay, well, that gets into the whole idea of a shelter for the animal as well, right?
Shelter and
So,
water.
I did go down to your street, there's a sign on the telephone pole across the street, beware of dog. How does that fit into that, to this
Well,
discussion?
We just want people to be aware of our dog.
Yes.
And that's actually
that's been up there
literally
for a while.
where the incident
long time.
happened, was right at that sign.
Okay, all right.
Was
Thank
the-
you.
Was the sign there?
Oh, yeah, it was there for
Before
a long
the
time.
incident?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
been there for
It's
years.
been there for, okay.
Yeah.
Yolanda?
So just to follow up on that, I did not go down the street, but thank you for, so the beware of dog, it's just to let people know that
That he's there. and
there's a
his
dog
presence is
there,
there,
not
yes.
necessarily what kind of dog, but
Right.
just that he's, okay. Just a couple other things. How old is Remy?
He's
3.
3. So still trainable. Okay. So, but it sounds like you're willing to listen to, you know, the recommendations from the
Absolutely.
animal control officers, keep them on leash. We were just having this conversation, we all know there's no bad dogs, but maybe owners that don't quite know how to handle them. But it sounds like you're working on that. So, you know, certainly keep him trained, look at the different ways you can keep him on your property, and as Steve said, the street is public property, so if you're gonna go from one side of the street to the other, he does need to be on leash.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joe, did you have any questions or comments?
I just have a few comments. The questions have already been answered, and I believe that the owners of Remy will follow through the recommendations that our animal control officer has recommended. And I think our board will surely recommend that they follow up, along with Mr. Leary, too. I mean, he goes without saying that his animal needs to stay, you know, tethered in his property and not run amok, you know, in that neighborhood as well. Especially where some of the reports have already mentioned that they've seen Mr. Leary running up the street to grab the dog because it's, you know, it's up Tri Street running around. So that goes without saying. I have a history with pit bulls. My daughter-in-law raises them and had bred them a long time ago. But she has them as pets, and they're wonderful animals if you raise them the right way. And that's like anything. You raise your child the right way, they'll be a loving child. If you raise them to be this, they'll be that, and that's what it is. My concern is that it stayed tethered in your yard, or fenced in, or even maybe a shot collar, so, for obedience training. That may be something you may want to consider doing as well. Because, once they get zapped a few times, they realize that, it's like Pavlov's bell, controlled behavior. You zap them and they know not to go out in that area.
Yeah, my friend's dog's bark collar hasn't had batteries in it for years, but she says she
Well,
just
if
puts
it's
it on the
there,
dog
that's
and
right.
they don't
That's
bark.
right. Exactly, so you may want to entertain doing something like that.
We've
All right.
considered that. He's got a big bark.
Thank
That's
you.
all I
I'm
have
just
to say,
going to,
Mr. Chair.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm going to just ask, the next thing, ask for anyone's,
One more question.
oh, go ahead.
He wasn't wearing 3D glasses when this happened, was he?
That was the solar eclipse glasses. We were looking at the solar eclipse.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to, the next thing, ask for anyone speaking in favor. Is that speaking in favor of being identified as a dangerous dog? Is that what that, can I just ask for who wants to come forward and speak on this matter? Come ahead, yes. Come up, you have to come up here, identify yourself, and speak into the microphone.
So my name is Matt Leary. I'm at 18 Charles Street, and it's a very unique situation because there's obviously two sides to the story, and the question I would have is the account on record is very different than my account of the events. And I believe from conversation with Donna that she received the account from, was it Colin? Did you? Okay. So the issue I have with this is that in the statement it says that my dog, Chase, on the morning of the 19th was actually off leash, which is entirely false. I was taking my dog for a walk. We went to the end of Charles. We took a left and did a loop around, came back down, and on the way back down, we were probably on the right-hand side of the street, and I saw Remy in the backyard and made a go at us, like full speed. And this wasn't Chase being off leash and me chasing him. This was me seeing the dog from 30 feet away. When I saw the look, the demeanor of the dog, I knew this was not going to end well. I grabbed Chase and protected him and attempted to just take the brunt of it. I've walked past the home before, and the dog has been in the car, and the noises that I've heard from this dog, it tells me that it was not going to be a friendly interaction. So I held Chase at my side, and with the speed of the dog coming at us, I attempted to catch his collar before anything had happened, and I missed, and the two dogs just absolutely went at it. The brunt of this knocked me over. I was on the ground with the two of them rolling around, and I'm not accusing the dog of attacking me. I believe that in trying to separate the two of them, Remy did get my hand. I saw it clear as day, and as he did that, Chase got him, and he released my hand. So I'm not saying that this dog attacked me. I was in the middle of this and unfortunately caught the brunt of it. Now, as this happened, Colin, heard it, came out and helped me separate the dogs and brought the dog back in. And in no way was Chase going at this dog. Chase was on the ground, limping, scared, terrified at what just happened. And after Colin brought the dog inside, he came out to talk, and I was pissed. I was incredibly upset that this happened. We've had this dog run at us in the street before, and I can understand that a dog is friendly with their family, with the kids. That's their pack, that's their family. Outside of that family, there's a very different scenario. And my concern is that with the leash regulation, accidents happen. My dog has gotten out several times now. It happens. Doors get left open. Dogs are fast. They see that open and they run. And my concern is that, my dog's gone out in the neighborhood and his interest is in other dogs. The first time he got out, Colin actually brought out his dog to try and lure him closer. And I wasn't there for this, but this is my brother's account. And Chase had no interest in the dog. He ran right to my brother and jumped in the car. So I'm not saying that this dog, I know the attempt is going to be there to keep him leashed and keep him in the home, but I'm worried about the off chance or the chance that he does get out again. It's not me. I think 2 stitches is nothing. I think it could have gone a lot worse. There's young kids in the neighborhood, and I'm worried that it could happen again. But I know that every dog, it's not a bad dog. Dogs can be trained to behave better, but in all honesty, the experience that I had did not tell me that was a friendly dog with my dog. It might be with people. I'm not accusing it of that, but I just don't want to run into that situation again. And I'm very worried about the possibility.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Comments or questions from the board for this person, or? Sure, go ahead, Carl.
So you would not be satisfied with the remedy proposed by the animal control officers? Is that what you're suggesting?
It's a gray area, to be honest. I know that's the best attempt that somebody can make, but in the situation that I experienced, it was horrifying. And I just don't want it to happen to myself, to anybody else in the neighborhood, to kids, other pets. So I think the leash is an excellent step. I think some sort of class, I don't know. A fence would definitely go a long way, but I mean, it's scary to think that if on the off chance he gets a door's open or the fence is unlocked, like, stuff happens.
Yeah.
But I'm not familiar with the property, but is there room to have a fenced-in area? You know, it's possible to have a fenced-in area and still have the dog on some kind of tether.
I mean, the more precautions we could take, the more comfortable I would be, you know? And I understand it's a very hard situation. A dog is a part of the family. Like, I get it. But it doesn't change the fact that the neighborhood is afraid of this dog, and I just don't want that to happen again.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board? I would note that there were other eyewitness statements that seem to corroborate what you're saying in terms of other people. That I thought either that incident or another one. There was another person that said basically the same thing. So I would note that. Yes.
Regarding tethering, what would be recommended? What would be an adequate, sufficient, safe way of tethering any dog?
Brianna, you have to speak into the microphone. Thank you.
know, Tethering the dog, he's gotta be attached to something, you know, if he's attached to a tree, it's gotta be a certain height. It says it all in the bylaws of, you know, the certain things. There's always a run possibility. Those are good, but you need to keep an eye on your dog as well. You know, they could get any tethering while the dog is up there, you gotta keep an eye on them. So there is, all in the bylaws of exactly, you know, if you do have your dog on a tether outside, and then under the tethering law, you know, how high it has to be up, what it can be attached to. You know, it's a good idea. Obviously, I think that possibly due to the fact that the dog gets out, slips through the door, a fence would be ideal. I know most of the property is fenced in already. I think it would just take a little bit more fencing to do it. But if the tethering is gonna work for the dog, I don't see why that's an issue as well.
So do either of you have a preference for a best solution? Would fencing as opposed to tethering?
I think, solution-wise, I know fencing can be expensive. It would be nice to have a fence there. I think that would make the neighborhood feel a little bit safer having the dog behind a fence. But if the tethering is gonna work for them as well and they can keep the dog contained, I don't see why that's an issue either. So it all depends on the dog.
How about training? Is that
It definitely could, you know,
class?
training is never a bad thing.
Right.
It's with the big breeds especially.
Sure.
But the tethering issue and the fence issue, if I understood it correctly, one of these issues happened because the dog get out the door. So it
Right.
wouldn't make any difference if they usually tether him if he gets out the
Right.
door.
So if there's a fence, that's the only good thing about the fence. If the dog gets out, he's gonna get into a fenced-in area, as long as the gate's shut.
Okay. Thank you, Brant.
Have you spoken to the owners about that possibility, or,
I didn't, Donna did.
and
She
what was
did
the
mention-
response?
So Donna's saying, just talked about either or. Yeah, you
Yeah.
should probably, I'm just translating for you since you're not on the microphone, but, or
Yeah, so either or.
not translate,
Just
but
depends
summary.
on the owners keeping, you know, as long as
Okay.
it's contained. Also, you know, depending on what kind of collar you have on the dog while you're tethering him, you know, there's a bunch of things. I mean, if you're not watching him, he slips out, you can get loose again. Why the
That's
fence
what I
would be ideal, but
All right. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this matter? All right, well, Sarah, recognize Sarah first. Go ahead.
Okay, not what I came in here for tonight, but
But you couldn't resist.
I'm Sarah Hines, Elliott Street. I couldn't resist. I'm around the corner. I raised and trained and exhibited in obedience trial dogs for 50 years. I don't have any right now. And this dog, I mean, I also have my own pit bull bite here that's now healed, but from a fear biter. You can't say they're all the same in personality. They all have different personalities. You need to know what you've got, and if you got an aggressive dog that's an alpha dog, that's a problem. I think by no shade of imagination could this dog at age 3 who's getting out multiple incidents be called trained. This dog needs training by the owners at a class where they learn to control the dog. But I'll tell you, to get a dog that will not run off and do something when it's tempted like that takes years of training. My neighbors next door on Elliott Street have the underground electronic fence. You don't see it. Those dogs never leave that property. Now, they're vulnerable to coyote attacks, so when they go out, they still go out with the flashlights when they walk the dogs. But I think that you're kidding yourself if you think this dog is going to be under control. If it can get out a door and it wants to, when it sees people and wants to charge them, the owners have no control.
Right.
It's good in a safe place when you're inside just with you, that's fine. But there's a public thing you have to do with dogs. And a large dog biting, it can escalate. Then the dog that bit me went on to kill their own cat a few weeks later. So you just don't know. So I think the tethering thing,
Yeah.
it can work, but a dog can
Okay.
get off of that. It can hurt itself. You've got to monitor it. If you're going to cage it, I would say you might want to get like one of those kennels that's not that big but has a lid on it if you want to leave the dog outside for a period of time. They're expensive to buy, but that solves it. Something that looks like you see in a vet's place. But this magnetic fence, which you can't put in the winter because the ground's frozen, can also work. But you have to train the dog to use that because the collar has got electric charge in it too. So anyway, I hate to see the dog, and I know they love the dog. I've had dogs that were problematic in behavior too. It sounds like, that's not far from me. If you have to have a sign up for years saying, beware of the dog, that's a problem. That also says that it's a problem, which I think has a lot of liability for you with your homeowner's insurance. So that's
All
it.
right,
Good
thank you,
points,
Sarah.
thanks.
Thank you, Sarah.
Anyone else? Bob, do you want to come up?
Hi, Robert Birdie from 16 Charles Street. Everybody who knows me knows I'm the biggest dog lover in the world. I got 2 dogs. I live right next door. But a couple years ago, with this dog, like Ryan said, Matt said, excuse me, from 300 yards away, the dog sounds like it's eating you. So I actually spent $8,000 and I put up a fence around my backyard to protect my 2 puppies. I would recommend that I would be nothing less than what I would recommend for them to do, is to fence it. They have a beautiful backyard. They have a big, giant backyard. They could fence in that giant backyard very easily because I already put up a fence this way, and they already have a fence going the other way. So they only have to do it like just a very small part of it. So it's not going to be that expensive for them. I think they need to be. The dog needs to be in a cage, in a nice big area so that it can run around. Because on the tether, I know the tether doesn't work because I used to put my old dog out there on the shed, and one day I came home and there's half my shed is with him, with the runs. So the runs don't work and the tethers don't work. They really don't. But if they would have fenced in their backyard like I did, and so I can let my dogs out and I never have to worry about anything. Not even a coyote, because the coyote's not jumping over my fence. So if for me on that neighborhood, I've been there for 25 years. I've had 8 different dogs there, and I've never had an issue with my dogs personally. It is a training thing. I think a mandatory recommended training, not something that says, oh, maybe you guys should train them or train the dog. Don't leave it up to them to train this dog, because I don't want to see a dog get put down because it's not behaving itself, ever. So I think not a recommended training. I think a mandatory training session with visits from the dog officers regularly for a certain period of time. I think maybe the neighborhood will feel a little bit more comfortable. I know what I did what I had to do to make myself feel comfortable. I am comfortable with my puppies because nobody can touch them. So I just think it's the same thing that they need to do if they want to have dogs
All right.
like that. So.
Good.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Thank you.
So I've got, anyone else want to speak on this matter that hasn't spoken? Actually, we're going to bring, why don't you guys, I think
Come
if it's
back up.
okay with the board, why don't you both come back up here for a discussion? Does anyone else want to speak on this that hasn't spoken? Okay. So before I close the hearing, we'll
I just
have a little
wanted to-
dialogue
to
with you
start
folks.
with saying that Matt is right about he was walking his dog on a leash in that account, and if you look at our accounts, that's also what we wrote. His dog that morning was on a leash. So, my pictures.
Okay. So questions or suggestions you
Yeah,
wanted to?
I have a question now, you're the dog owners, are you the property owners as well?
No, we rent.
So how would you manage if we were to condition this by, and I do want to thank Sarah for her comments, because I think that's spot on with training
The
as
thing
well.
is I
Let me
feel like-
finish my comments, please, and then, so we can condition this in a number of different ways, and one of which would be a mandatory obedience training, and fencing, for that matter. So how would you manage, if you're not the property owners?
My grandparents own the property, so I could talk to them if we had to put a fence in.
Okay, so that is,
We
it
could
is
put a
feasible.
fence in if we could afford it, though, I mean, it's gonna take some, I don't have $8,000 to spend on a fence in my back pocket, I mean.
I don't think it's gonna cost them that much, but even if they start, one section at a time, it's Home Depot. You don't have to get reliable fence. A reliable fence is $8,000. You wanna go to Home Depot, you could do it for $300.
Well, it's not our, it's
Not our-
really not our
Make
duty here
determinations
to-
Right,
for them to
right,
do it.
but my duty is to protect my dog and what I feel my dog is capable of, and the fact is, I understand he needs more training, she's right, every dog has its own personality, I know that, I know dogs, I know animals, I love all different kinds of animals, I don't discriminate against animals, breeds, anything, but the fact is that my dog is a sweetheart, he's a stubborn SOB, and I am still working with him,
Yeah.
But from like my first priority was safety for everybody, not just the people within my family, within my pack, everybody, that was my first priority, and that's accomplished,
I don't know.
He has not bitten anybody in my care, no other dogs, nothing, he's gotten off on me, yeah, he's approached people, yeah, but he's never bitten. He's been bitten by multiple dogs. He's never bitten anybody, even in that state where he was being bitten.
So I guess the question is, though, that I understand that you're concerned about you and your pack. We have to be concerned about the whole pack,
Yes, and
right?
I understand,
And we're
we're
totally
taking
willing
it.
to follow
Yes.
the leash law, which we hadn't been following before because both of our property on both sides of the street, we walk back and forth, we
and
go
I
in the
feel like
woods, and the dog comes back if you call him. He does run towards people, but if you call him, he does normally come back.
That was a big part of my
So-
training, was trust between the two of us,
Right.
So
Okay.
he's at like a,
So,
But you
60-40.
realize, what you're describing here is not inspiring a lot of confidence in me, to be
Yeah.
honest.
From here on out, he is gonna be.
he's been on the leash.
On the leash, in the back, not even out front. I've had him out in the back, not causing any trouble at all.
Yolanda, do you
And
want to?
I'm gonna continue with the training, and I'm gonna continue to ensure that he does not get out, and,
And his,
I trust we're not gonna see a problem.
His lead is in the back, which is mostly fenced off, so.
So just a couple things, just so you realize, you are talking to a number of people who either currently have dogs, have had dogs. We've all been there in regards to
Yes.
training issues. So a couple things from that perspective. I understand you're doing training yourself. As we've discussed this, I would say, I like the idea of our animal control officers checking in with you. And if within a month or two, we're seeing that there's not the obedience happening or the training happening, that we then say, okay, you have to go to, hold on, let me finish. Take a second, take a breath, believe me. If we're not seeing the training happening, then we may have to mandate that you go to get training for you and the dog. And part of that is, just recently, I've been talking with different people, that just because you say your dog is friendly, right, and you say he's not gonna hurt someone, consider that woman on the street
Yes.
with her little
I
dog,
understand.
who, he's a bigger dog, if you have a small dog, or if you have a dog who is not friendly, if your dog is on a leash, you're expecting that if someone has their dog off leash, that they have full control of that animal. And you saying as the owner, he's friendly, but you can't make them stop and come back to
Right.
you if they still go to the dog, that means he's not under your control.
Yes, I understand how scary he can be running up, and I understand that it's my fault when he gets loose like that. I understand 100%, and I understand, I know what it's
Okay.
like to have a big dog run at me. you
Okay.
know? And I'm telling you that it's not gonna happen again, you know?
Okay.
All right.
I didn't have a problem for a while. What I did is I let him have like a 20-foot rope, so that if he ever tried to run, that rope was right there by my foot and I can get him, you know? So that was his, you know, so.
Right, but
Is that 20 feet, though, keeping him within your property, or does that
It was.
allow
It
him
was
to
on
go
my-
off the
No,
property?
it
on the
was
property.
when we were on
Because
the
I didn't, first
property.
I had him cabled up all the time, I didn't trust him,
Right.
you know? And then we started the training process, and I gave him what I called the freedom rope. I let him roam with the rope, and if he saw something and ran, I could get to the back of that rope before he got anywhere,
Okay.
you know?
All right, does the board feel they have enough information to deliberate at this point and come up with a series, I think, a number of recommendations? Is that the consensus here? I will add that, I think you need to make sure you're cognizant of the quality of life in the neighborhood and your impact on it so far. We've had, I think we've 3-4 people telling us that they're in fear of walking by your house with a dog or without a dog.
I also don't understand why none of the neighbors could try to meet my dog. They say that it's friendly
All right,
because it's
but,
within
okay,
the
so I
pack,
think
but
that's
people without
something,
the pack-
you could talk to them on your own about that, but I think we've had clear statements from people about, what's happened, so I hope I think you're cognizant of that, and that, the position of this board will be that we will not allow this situation to continue as it is, so please keep that in mind as we go through these recommendations. Any other questions for
Yeah.
these folks?
One more question, and your dog wasn't licensed.
Yes, I would.
Why was that?
I didn't, I'm from Woonsocket, we don't need licenses out there. I didn't know we needed a license.
I knew
I'm
that the
sorry.
dog needed license, but I just hadn't gotten to it at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we'll deliberate, and then I think I close the hearing, and then we take a vote. So, Yolanda, or did someone have some specific motions they wanted to make on this?
I'd just like, the input that was provided to us by our animal control officer was such that the dog should be either tethered and or fenced in. And that came from a recommendation of an individual who does this on a day-to-day basis. All of us being, having pets ourselves and stuff, we know what we need to do, we know what we need to follow. And again, Rob, you hit it right on the head with respect to the quality of life within the neighborhood. And I think it's important that those people realize that they have the ability to stay safe. I know some of the kids that are growing up, but there are young families that are in that neighborhood now. Hopefully they have their children, and they don't need to be, worried about that, and the smaller animals that are in that neighborhood as well. Fencing, additional training, whether he does it on his own or he goes through a professional trainer in some respect. I don't know how much that
Well,
would.
I think Yolanda suggested some sort of evaluation process.
Through the
rather than
ACO.
mandating training immediately. I don't know.
Is that something that our animal control officers can do? Certainly, again, if he feels like he can train the dog, it's an older dog, it takes a little while, but there should be progress shown, right? Any dog can be taught how to stay. Any dog can be taught what it means to stop when your master says stop. And I think you should be able to see progress on that, either in a month or 2 months. And then if we're not seeing that happening, then we can mandate that they actually go and work with a trainer.
Do you guys, is that a workable?
Is that something-
You'd need to go out there and monitor and actually kind of observe the animal's behavior with the owner. I see they're nodding, yes.
So I just want to clarify, are you asking our animal control officers to certify that the dog is trained, or just to make sure that it's going to training, or?
Again, you can tell when a dog is trained. If you put a dog in a stay and the owner can walk away, you can see that it has training. If if the dog is going someplace and the owner yells stop and the dog drops, you can tell that it's been trained. Whether it's the person who owns the dog and they've been doing it because they know how to train a dog, or because they've gone through training and have learned how to do that with their dog.
Is there a certification process for dog trainers, or is there like a license type process?
There's classes,
Sounds like we need to mandate classes.
Can you come to the microphone?
Yeah,
just so that-
why don't you go?
And while you're doing that, Brianna, let me just explain my concern.
Okay.
My concern is putting our animal control officers in a situation where they essentially certify that a dog is being trained. And then
Okay.
if something happens subsequent to that, the liability that the town would have.
I would suggest that we can condition this by requiring a mandatory training session. And then,
Getting a
you know,
certificate.
I think all we would ask animal control to do is
Confirm that it
is
happened.
confirm that it has happened. And, you know, there's a lot of great training facilities in Metro West. So I think there's no lack of opportunity there. But I think, you know, it's not a question of animal control certifying. I think the burden here is on the owner to do the right thing regarding training. And one more question I have, how about muzzling? What is, and I don't know anything about it, so I'm just asking the question.
That would be, muzzling would kind of be a last, I think. You know, that's more of a dangerous dog. The dog should be
Hasn't been-
restrained. I don't think it
okay.
needs to be wearing a muzzle all the
Okay.
time.
Great. Other
Wouldn't make that recommendation.
questions or?
No, I think it depends on your perspective here, whether it's something, obviously, the neighbors are gonna consider this potentially dangerous, and then there's that presumption, because it's a pit bull, that it might be potentially dangerous. And other people may just see it as a nuisance, but we have one or the other. In the past, when we've done these things, we have required that they be tethered and leashed, and you were monitoring that. You weren't certifying anything. You were just verifying that this was happening. And the dogs were kind of put on probation, that if that wasn't happening, then we would have to go to the next step. Having said that, I still think it wouldn't be a bad idea to consider training, or consider finishing the fence in the backyard. I mean, it may not be as expensive as you might think, and it might prevent a whole lot of potential problems down the road.
So I'm trying to get kind of an idea of so we have, I think the board has agreed that they either tether or fence the dog, and
Yep,
and, of course,
And
continue
leashed.
with the leash,
Mhm.
comply with the leash law. Then I think the question is that we mandate some sort of training session or not. I think that's the question, and then some kind of monitoring return. Is that pretty much, are those the three things? Is the board agreed about of ordering mandatory training, or is that, what are we thinking about that?
Have we done that in the past?
We haven't had this circumstance in the past, so we haven't.
We haven't had a circumstance.
This type, as I recall, but, I
More
think-
containment than training.
yeah.
And I think part of me is thinking that let them, follow the leash law, certainly keep the dog restrained. Should they come back, should there be another complaint, then have mandated go to class training.
I tend to agree with that, because as I listen to this, and I'm not belittling it,
No,
except it's really becoming a regular occurrence in this town, in other places, where dogs are not leashed, and they're aggressive, and they're aggressive in the eyes of the person that they're approaching, and they're friendly in the eyes of the owner, and I hear it over and over. I can't tell you how many times I've heard it, either at the state park, or at Warren Woods, or wherever it is. And so I think it's a little bit unfair to impose mandatory training on these people and not on everybody else that's committing the same issues, or creating the same issues. So I would agree with you, Yolanda, that if that was agreeable with everyone else.
I think that's,
Other
I'm good with that.
thoughts on that?
I'm good with that.
Yeah. Well, we're discussing fencing versus tethering, is that really where we're?
Well, right now it's or, I believe, but.
Yeah, either or, right?
Yeah.
So before we get to that point, just a couple things, and maybe for the owners, I pulled off some info from SP, the Mass Protection for Animals, and just a couple things. What can I do to help prevent my dog from, in this case it says biting, but, let's say misbehaving? obey leash and licensing laws, know your dog's behavior and personality, socialize your dog, and I think you mentioned that earlier about maybe getting together with some of your neighbors and trying to socialize that way. Provide obedience training for your pet, and avoid exposing your pet to situations where you are unsure what your dog's response will be. So, it's just part of ownership, I guess, knowing what your dog is capable of doing and responding accordingly, so.
Okay, so it sounds like we have the tethering and fencing as a mandatory thing, and then
No, fencing isn't mandatory. He has to be
tethering
leashed or
or,
tethered
yeah, or, I said or.
all the times,
Yeah,
or they need to put up a fence.
right.
Right.
Well, I'll ask for a motion in I guess we'll do that after we close the hearing. So is that pretty much it? Do we have any language about training or evaluation by the animal control office, follow-up?
I just think the follow-up would be should the dog, should there be another report that this dog has gotten off its leash or out of his house and does not listen to the owner, then there would be mandatory training.
And I think, but the only caution I would, as I think Mr. Leary said, that, if there could be a serious incident, so I am concerned about that. And that's why I think that's some sort of proactive action, like training the dog to actually control
Well,
himself
I
rather
believe the
than.
owner has said that he's continuing to work and train the dog.
So I
if
think we
that's-
should-
If that really happens, if that's true, then he will get control of the dog.
Yeah, so I would ask that we have something about him continuing his training sessions, if people think that's realistic.
Like I said, I think he has committed to continuing to train his dog,
Yes. I think I'd be more comfortable if we put it in writing, but.
except that we're not quite sure how we would monitor that.
Is that?
Through
Okay.
the
Well, I'll
certificate of
ask, all
training.
right, so are we ready to close the hearing? So
Mhm.
I'll close the hearing, and we'll go into, we'll call for a vote. Okay, thank you, Brianna, the hearing's closed. Okay, so do I have a motion?
I think we have to vote, motion to close the hearing.
Oh,
Second.
sorry. I have a
Motion
motion to,
second.
Motion.
motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing's closed unanimously. Okay, so, motions. So, do we do any further determination on the dog's status versus dangerous versus nuisance? Is that anything we need to
It's nuisance
vote on?
It's nuisance for this hearing.
Right, for this hearing.
For
it's
this hearing,
nuisance.
it's nuisance.
Okay,
I
I was
I
asking if
don't-
we need to make any motion on that, as
Yeah.
opposed to our recommendation.
I think you can incorporate
In the-
that
Okay.
into your
In the,
motion.
All right, so I'm gonna ask for a motion. Is someone ready to make a
Yes,
motion?
I am.
I had a feeling you might be.
I move that we deem this dog as a nuisance, that that the owners are required to follow all the bylaws of the town in regards to keeping the dog leashed off property, but also on their property to have control of the dog, to make sure it's licensed and vaccinated. And should this dog be brought back before us as having bothered other animals, we will then put in mandatory class training with a certified trainer.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just clarify, not just other animals, but the
Any interaction?
Other
Residents of-
residents
I say
of the
any-
street,
any
that's fine.
interaction.
I accept that
Okay.
amendment.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So the
Thank you,
motion's
Brianna
been
and
made.
Donna.
and
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to see us on
Thank you
this.
all for your
Okay,
input.
yep, thank you.
As
Okay, all
owners, you now know what to do.
right.
Okay.
And, yeah, I would encourage, if you have any questions or other issues, contact the animal control officer for
And as
follow-up.
residents of the street, if you have issues,
Call us.
please contact them as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to email the Board of Selectmen with
Right,
any
that too.
comments or questions, of course.
And
Thank
good luck
you.
with all your dogs on that street.
Yes,
It sounds like it's quite the dog park.
yeah, thanks.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, wait,
Never mind.
don't go there.
We're working on it. We actually
Okay.
are. There's a
Sure.
committee. I'm serious. There's a committee working on a dog park.
Oh, good, all right, thanks,
I'm gonna
Bob.
get your name on that.
I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you.
You'll give it
Thanks,
to me?
everybody.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, so, the next item on the agenda is our discussion on the establishment of a registered marijuana dispensary. And I may ask Michael to clarify. So we intend to have a robust discussion, allow people to speak who want to speak within certain time limits, and hopefully, does anybody knows it's snowing outside? I guess we have to go through with this, huh? So, okay. So, but we are looking forward to hearing everyone's opinions on this and have an extensive discussion. I do want to, just to kind of lay it out, that I don't believe the board will take any formal action tonight, as it under, we have not been presented with the actual request for a letter of non-opposition at this time.
Yeah, that's not what tonight is about.
Right. So we will listen to folks, and I think the board will give their own thoughts and opinions, and we'll discuss it and come up, people will give, the board will make their thoughts known about issues with this, and with the idea of helping to guide the town manager as he goes forward with the discussion of this. So, can I just see by a show of hands how many people would like to speak on this matter? I'm just trying to figure out the time. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, about 7 or 8. Okay. So I think that we have time for. Luis, did you raise your hand or?
I would just say that we just spent an hour talking about a dog, and I think this definitely deserves more.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's about. We had about an.
Maybe
We'll
I will
we'll do an hour and 1 minute then at least. Okay. So so I think we have about time for about 5 minutes per person. I don't know. I did want to ask Amy. Did you have a presentation that's longer than that? Maybe, Amy.
Really?
Were you thinking to talk more than 5 minutes?
I didn't time myself, so.
All right, you just might. Okay.
Maybe you want to time me.
I'm willing to make an exception in your case, but also if there's someone who's speaking on the other side who wants to take more than 5 minutes, I would think that would be fair. Is there anybody like that? All right, I guess not. Okay, so I will. And if the board has anything else they want to say before we listen to folks,
The
or
only thing I would ask is that if, that when the speakers come up, if they added something new to the discussion, and that's something that's already been
Right.
discussed already, just to, I mean, we understand what the concerns are. Again, we still want to hear from the citizens, but if they have new information that they
Sure.
want to provide, that would.
And
probably
I
be
think it is also
To the
fair, though,
discussion.
if they've sent us an email, they can refer to that and
And-
just
and they
confirm
have.
what they said.
And they have.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would just suggest that the town manager bring us up to date, at least in a nutshell, on how we got to this
Sure,
point
that
and
sounds
why
like a
we're
good
having
idea.
this
So
discussion.
before we, that's a great idea. So
it-
before we get into that, I think, Michael, you want to spend a minute or two just kind of summarizing where we are
wanna
and what's
time me?
going on?
Yeah, okay.
I
You
am.
have 4.3 seconds.
Okay.
3 seconds.
Nutshell, go.
That's
So in a
right.
nutshell, as you know, back in September, I believe, the board was approached by a company called Tricone for a letter of non-opposition to move ahead with the process of opening a medicinal marijuana dispensary. They had done that because we had a moratorium on medicinal marijuana, I think back in 2014. Zoning was passed in a subsequent town meeting, and so that was the next step in the process of anybody who wanted to open a medical marijuana dispensary. They had to go before the board and get a letter of non-opposition. At that time, and I think there might have been some confusion at the next meeting, because I wasn't at the meeting with the Tricone presentation. It sounded like the board wanted to at least have the opportunity to review what's known as a host community agreement with Tricone before making a final determination as to whether or not you wanted to move forward with a letter of non-opposition. You thought that was an important part of your deliberation. So I, started those discussions with Tricone, and over a series of months, came upon a draft host community agreement, which was presented to you, I believe, in January. It might have been February. I don't remember exactly. But at that time, I think the board decided that it wanted to have really more of a more generalized discussion about medicinal marijuana in the community. and what your concerns would be with regards to that, and, you know, if that's something that Ashland should really entertain, or if it does want to entertain it, you know, what kind of restrictions should be, you know, should be in place, and what kind of limitations, things of that nature. So that's where we are tonight. That's tonight's general discussion. So I've been advised by council that although the board cannot take a vote to say we do or we do not want to have medicinal marijuana in the community, you can certainly express your views as to what you think, you know, is appropriate or not appropriate here for the town. And that will, in essence, guide anything that we do
Thank you.
further.
Did you?
I have
Go
a
ahead.
couple of questions. Did you say that you weren't here for the first Tricom
I was not here for the first presentation, no.
You were not? Okay. Well, maybe that's where the communication breakdown
That's
happened.
interesting. I didn't think of that.
And did we get a clarification from council as to the applicability of our moratorium on recreational versus medicinal?
It is on recreational only. So even though the bylaws, the moratorium in our bylaws doesn't distinguish between medicinal and recreational, it refers to the act, which is, you know, considered the adult use. They call it adult use. They don't call it recreational. I don't know why, but it does refer to that act. So it is only in reference to adult use or recreational marijuana.
Thank you. So one thing, and just to clarify, there's, you know, this is the registered marijuana dispensary, the so-called medical use, not the recreational or adult use that we'll be discussing. That will be as a referendum on the ballot on May 15th, and also the opt-out will be a town meeting. So that is a different process, but of course, it does, you know, affect what we're talking about tonight. But I just want to make clear that we're not talking about recreation or adult use marijuana. Should we talk at all about the legal opinion we got from Kate about the conversion? That is a question that several of you have asked us about that, or stated that, you know, one of the reasons we shouldn't be doing a registered dispensary is because they could have the unilateral right to convert to a recreational establishment. So we did ask town council for a legal opinion on that, and I think it'd be, do you think you could summarize that for us, Michael?
Sure. So, you know, the bottom line is that it has never been tested, the legality of a medicinal marijuana facility converting to a recreational marijuana facility has never been tested because it's so new.
Hasn't happened.
and so-
Doesn't happen. Well,
So that being said, you know, council feels like there is strong contract law that states that if a certain medicinal marijuana dispensary entered into a proactive and affirmative contract agreement with the board that says that they will not convert to recreational marijuana, that contract would supersede anything, because Trichome is, or a medicinal marijuana dispensary would be actively waiving their rights to convert to a recreational facility by entering into that agreement.
And we do have that clause in the tentative contract. That language has currently been at least verbally agreed to by them. Is that true?
Well, yeah, and I want to just caution the board as to kind of mixing the Trichome host community agreement with this general discussion, but
Okay.
I will say that the direction I took from the board from the last meeting, it sounded like, so there was language in there that said that it could convert to a recreational marijuana facility with the Board of Selectmen's approval. What your concern was at the time was a future Board of Selectmen could make that, make a decision. So, and you didn't want to necessarily open that gate. So, what I took from that conversation was that any host community agreement would have to unequivocally state that the applicant would not convert to recreational marijuana.
And how does the opt-out play into this equation as well? So if we opt out as a community to adult use, how does that impact the conversion potential?
There is some language surrounding licenses that were, whether an engaged facility facility was engaged in the operation of medicinal marijuana could convert, or if it was engaged prior to the July 1st, 2017 date, if the town or city subsequently opted out of recreational marijuana, there's some ambiguity to the language in the provision that states whether or not a medicinal marijuana facility licensed before that 7/1/2017 date could still flip over to recreational marijuana.
And if I may, the Cannabis Study Commission hasn't come up with any wording or clarification as to what they're going to allow and what they're not going to allow. So, I mean, we're looking at them for guidance as to how we should be doing things, and yet they don't have any clue as to where they want to go with this.
They just came out with.
They
Well-
came out with their regs in regards to
They,
the conversion.
they didn't vote on it. It's my understanding they didn't vote on it. That sounds like it was a draft,
No.
because there was
No,
still.
they came out on March 15th, they were finished.
They were finished on it? Well,
People are still
If-
questioning stuff,
Yeah,
but they
there's
did come
still
out with their regs.
ambiguity.
Right,
Well,
there's
there
still
is
ambiguity, but there
ambiguity,
are,
right.
there are regs.
So, all right,
in
well,
place now
okay,
for
before,
recreation.
all right, so do we have, I think, a pretty definitive opinion from town council that that this can be conversion can be controlled, at least to
Potentially.
the extent it's possible, to think it's very likely, I guess. There is some small uncertainty, I think.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
You discussing the memo? from-
Yeah, the conversion.
I think it's time to allow
Memo.
the public to, because we're not
Yeah.
supposed to
Are
go into
you-
too much detail.
Did
but
you have
it's time
something
to
else
let
you
the
wanted to
public-
say before I open
Yeah,
it up? or-
I was more confused after I read it, actually, than I was before we got it. Because it says here that it's unclear. Here it says Ashland may have further protection. It says here, again, Ashland may have further protecting. It could be argued. That's not exactly definitive language when you're coming to having an opinion on something.
Well, and again, it comes to the point that it's never been tested, right, in the courts. And so, really, all town council was laying out here is really the argument that they would argue.
Yeah, and I'm
To
not blaming
prohibit.
council, I'm
Yeah.
just, I'm speaking to the ambiguity that's involved in the
Right.
whole thing.
and that was a draft that
Okay.
we received, there wasn't
Right.
anything.
that was-
All right, so I think I'm gonna invite folks to come forward, to speak on this. Who wants to be first? All right, don't be shy.
Don't
I
rush.
mean, you
We got people in the back standing up ready.
Oh, and I just want to note, do we think we can make this legal opinion public, or maybe post it so people can review it? It does say draft, and so, I think, you could ask.
Yeah, I
Lisa
mean, I
about that.
will ask. I think anything that would apply to like attorney-client privilege could be waived by one of the parties.
Yeah,
so
if people think that, it might be helpful, people to look at what we're dealing with.
You can just
Take
hand
take
it.
You
one,
just- yeah, we'll just take 'em,
give it
pass
a
it down.
pile and they'll pass
Just
it down.
give it to Susan, and then,
Thank you.
hi.
My name's Brian Garrigan. I'm the Guidance Department Liaison at Ashland High School. I'm also the advisor to our chapter of Students Against Destructive Decisions. I would have preferred to have had several students with me this evening. I asked them to stay home because I didn't want them downtown at night in a snowstorm. So it's me. It's just me tonight. The kids have created this proclamation that you have. I'd like to read it for the record. It's called a Proclamation on Marijuana Businesses in Ashland from the Ashland chapter of the Students Against Destructive Decisions. The Ashland High School chapter of Students Against Destructive Decisions wishes to voice its opposition to the establishment of businesses that grow, manufacture, distribute, and sell marijuana and marijuana products in the town of Ashland, Massachusetts, either for medical or recreational purposes. It's our belief that smoking or ingesting marijuana products during the teen years statistically increase the possibility of health and addiction problems with these and other drugs in adulthood, and that the presence of businesses that grow, manufacture, distribute, and sell marijuana and marijuana products in Ashland will increase the possibility of exposure and access to underage users. We ask that the Ashland Board of Selectmen deny the establishment of any medical and recreational marijuana businesses in the town of Ashland.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Questions or comments? I just want to get a sense of the board. Do you want to, when people make their statement, do you want to question them or just listen, you know?
I think it depends on what the statement
Yeah,
is.
if it's
So,
to be
all
a
right, so,
question,
yeah,
reserve
good,
the right.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Okay. Sarah Hines, Elliott Street. Also, I'm sort of speaking a bit for Paula Parker, who's sick tonight, because she and I and Yolanda are on the Pond Street redevelopment committee. And we've put years in on this project. As you know, it's about $13 million worth of state-funded improvement to that roadway, plus several $100,000 worth of town money has gone into that project. And the reason for doing that is to increase the property values and the tax base on Route 126, which we said it's been a stated policy of the town, this is going to become an economic engine for the town. At the moment, the values are more like $4,000 an acre there, which is not as good as most residential taxes in the town. And part of it's because it's sprawl, because also part of it is because it's low-value development. And if we're trying to get developers to come in and do better and more things, we're faced with a look now in which if you start at Framingham line and go south, it would be marijuana dispensary followed by paintball where people play at mass killings, you know, it's sort of, and then you've got Restore, which is a new thing coming in, which is sort of used furniture and used building supplies. I've seen one of their stores in which they actually had sofas on the front porch of the building. And then we have, you know, dollar store. What's happening is we're getting these low-value build-outs in that area, which can end up making it even more difficult to get an improvement there, a sense of the, you know, the quality of the town, the demographics of the people that live in the condos would or Sherburne or Holliston would show that we could support some really good businesses there. You know, good entertainment establishments, good stores, good shops. But it's going to be very difficult to get them if we keep kind of reinforcing the low value, kind of, you know, low income sort of businesses that we're getting there. I mean, I know I've put a lot of time in on town committees here trying to do, you know, ideas for the downtown, ideas for 126, and sometimes I get pushback that, oh, that's not Ashland. Well, this will be a determination. Is this Ashland? Which way does Ashland go? Does it go toward, you know, a really junky strip of all sorts of stuff going on? Or do we hold the line? We need to make decisions about what we can and can't control, because we would like this to become an important town street for commercial and every kind of development. So that's my main reason. I'm a little agnostic about whether we get marijuana in town somewhere, but I do think the interest of the money where it's going toward fixing up Route 126, this will work against it. So think about that.
Well, hold on, Sarah. So anybody want to comment or question on that? Okay.
So, you know, I want to preface any comments that I make, any discussion, as not to be disrespectful in any way, not to be dismissive of any opinions. I'm just, you know, I'd like to have a balanced conversation about this. And so I guess my question is to why do you think that a brand new building on basically a vacant lot for the last 15 years would be a negative here in this particular case? Forget
Well,
about I mean, if it were a CVS that was coming, that wanted to put a building there, how would you,
Statistics,
would there be a
this is
different?
from Paula, statistics show that where there are marijuana shops, probably from Colorado mostly, that property values are depressed by it, by 10 to 15%. And it also, it talks about the total look of the street as we're beginning to get it coming in. Which direction is that going to go? I'm assuming this is the site, the 40 Pond Street, is that old landscape company that has a little wooden building?
Yeah.
Farm stand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the impression of the street. I mean, I think that if we're trying to bring the street up in value, you know, we've got we've got,
Well, I just want to push it that a little bit. So I'm expecting that if this goes forward, there would be like an attractive kind of office building that looks like, you know, a medical office building. Do people think that's not going to happen?
I have no idea, I haven't seen anything proposed as a building to
No,
be.
we haven't, so we, you know, it's tough to, but there's requirements that are pretty stringent as to
Right.
how these buildings are, but that aside, I mean, you know, I guess.
If you made it beautiful, would it still be
How could it not
detrimental?
improve the property value of that underutilized lot? So number one. And number two is, I would push back also on the impact of property values in general, because I've looked at a lot of data as well regarding property values. Now, we don't have that information here in Massachusetts. The industry is too young. But in other parts of the country, for what I'm seeing in industry, real estate industry literature, that's not the case, that they're seeing property values, either residential or commercial, go down.
Oh, okay, that's numbers that Paula Parker has,
Well, I'm just,
that
you
she
know,
said.
and I think everybody needs to go and look for
Do you
themselves
go down
about
or
this.
go up?
They generally either stay static or they go up,
She
is
said it
what,
was Century
said go down.
21 had done research that showed within a radius of a quarter of a mile of the pot
and,
shops.
and,
that-
and again, everybody, you know, this is Massachusetts, this is not
Well, it hasn't
Colorado
happened
or
here, yeah.
Washington. So you have to do a little homework here, but I'm just
But
saying
you,
it's,
you can't know what the effect will be here.
well,
But there is the larger overall direction of where we're going with Pond Street once we put all this money into it. How do we attract,
Yeah.
you know, much more upscale stuff if we've got a lot of marginal-looking things?
And I guess I would have to answer to you, Stephen, is that the type of research that an individual does, statistically, you can find any type of information that's gonna back what you're trying to push. You know, statistics are gonna, you make them what you want them to be. So, I mean, there are studies that are for, there are studies that are against, and you have to weigh out what, you know, what the community actually wants, not what we as a board want, but what the community sees and that lives there. I can't answer for the people that reside down there, but they've expressed their concerns to us. I think we've all read their emails. And not to listen to them and just say, well, statistically, and if you do your research, it says this. Well, again, statistics help you in one way, but you can also find the same statistics that can say, no, it's not good for you. So you throw that out with the wash.
well, you're 100% correct, Joe. I mean, it's just, you know, I guess it's a question of having, you know, you have to have a conversation, I think, that has to incorporate some data.
And I agree.
And you're right. I mean, you know, depending on what side of the fence you're on, you're gonna come up with data. And again, you have to do your own homework here in that sense.
Right, and again, if you read Ms. Parker's email from this afternoon, some of the information she provided came from retailers.com. I mean, a lot of people look at that when they're looking to, you know, move or they're trying to relocate. You look at these locations and you look at these websites to read about what's going on. And actually, they said within a half-mile radius of a marijuana business, the property values have gone down in those areas. It was no different when we did our research with the casinos and, you know, when they wanted to put a casino in Milford. We did our research and we did our studies as to what was gonna happen to the property levels and the property values and, you know, in and around the surrounding areas. We found that they would all go down, and that the mom and pop stores and other restaurants and other businesses within a 5-mile radius, within 10 years, would be gone. So, you know, we have to be very careful the type of research and what you're looking for. And again, we need to keep our ears open and our eyes and our minds open as to what the townspeople want, not what we want, not additional tax dollars, because to me personally, well,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go there. but-
And again, it's not, you know, my intent of questioning is just really to have a balanced conversation here,
Yeah,
because
oh,
I think we,
sure. I
you
mean,
know.
what would your reaction be if it was proposed to go into 21 Main? There is a vacant thing there.
Well, we're not zoned there. We're zoned on the highway commerce.
Oh, wait a minute,
It's-
let's not have a
It's-
dialogue
But that's
outside of
where the zoning, town meeting created the zoning. And
It's
that-
an overlay
it's
district
the-
there.
The Highway Commerce District, that's where it's zoned. And there were certain parameters that created that zoning, you remember. right? 750 feet away from certain entities, you know? You know, if we were zoned at Main Street, yeah, we would be talking about Main Street, but it is not. It's zoned right there.
So, does anyone else want
Anyone?
to
Yeah,
ask
we have
questions?
15 people here that we said we were going to let them
Okay,
speak,
let's-
and then we were going to deliberate, so I think we should get
Okay,
back.
Fair
that's a good point. Okay.
Hi, Judy Margulies, 53 America Boulevard. I actually came to listen, but here I am, because I actually would like, I wanted to step up now just to add to that conversation. Yes, I know this is a general conversation, not necessarily just a Tricome conversation, but yet it doesn't, you know, go beyond any of us that 40 Pond Street is in an area that's 1,000 feet away from the Framingham line. And to add to these comments, that if you watch what's going on in Framingham right now, there's a lot of discussion about their downtown. There have been several new projects proposed, and not only proposed, but now going forward, and there are several of them. There's a real dynamic sense that they're going to be bringing businesses into that area, stronger businesses, and we in Ashland could easily play off of that development initiative, because it truly is happening there. So I think that we should really be looking at what potential there is for all of this. There is also a daycare that's very, it's 1,000 feet, it's outside of the zoning, but right down the road, and I know personally that they were not aware that this was even being proposed. So I think it's important to have that broader conversation. To Joe's comment about and other people's comments about the potential ambiguity, I have attended 3 of the 5 Cannabis Control Commission meetings in Boston over the last month, where they did come up, finalize, and discuss in detail the public comment that they had gotten concerning their guidelines. And yes, even they know that there are ambiguities there. They have tabled certain items until the fall, and know that certain things will be not determined until next year. I don't think this is the place to go into all of those ambiguities, but what the attorney here says in terms of may, could be, those concerns are shared by other towns actively. There are many towns, including Hanover, Bridgewater, and Sharon, who've written the Cannabis Control Commission on that same question of what is the conversion, what is the, lots of people are talking about that. We know that this is going to be a powerful industry. They are already powerful, conducting conferences in Boston, summits. We know that, and if we're being not conservative, but cautious in terms of putting ourselves in legal positions, that's always really important, that we be on solid ground. The last thing I wanted to mention is, just to use Tricome as an example, their business model does not appear to be sound. They are anticipating their income based upon $325 to $350. You can read that on their application. They made an application in Lakeville. That's public knowledge. It's easy to find, and what they're anticipating. Presently, did I say pound? Ounce. I meant ounce. Sorry. You can tell I'm probably not in the business here. Colorado right now is anticipating $60 to $200 an ounce. You can find it for home delivery by illegal entities like Roll With Us on the internet right now. You can Google that. For $500 for 2 ounces, so that's $250. That's what the marketplace that's been in business. This particular company's been in business for 4 years, at least of what appears on the internet. But their business model is based upon a large population using their product. And in their testimony, when they came to speak to you, I really question a business that does not appear to be on solid grounds in their business projections. And to that extent, I would encourage you to look at exactly what the dollars mean in terms of what they anticipate to have as their income, and what population are they planning to market that to? Because we know that in the medical marijuana, medical marijuana's been around, established since 2016. It's well established. That accepts home delivery. The non-medical does not. And the non-medical is one of those things that they're still working on, the delivery piece, whether that's even going to be allowed going forward. So, you know, you have to look at the population base as to who exactly they're projecting this to be. Even according to their numbers, they would anticipate 1% of the population. So in Massachusetts, 7 million people, that's 70,000. In Ashland, how many adults we have here? What, 11,000? I'm not exactly sure, 12, somewhere in that neighborhood. You're talking about 120 people if you're talking about 1% of that population. Even if you add the children, you're talking about a much smaller number. So the numbers don't really make sense in terms of a business model. So I'd encourage you to do that and look at that.
Thank you for that. So just to follow up, Judy, so two things. You're saying that their price that they use in projections is higher than the market price is likely to be?
Much higher.
And that their kind of estimated projected number of customers, they're not likely to make that as well, or?
Well, the customers, it's truly an unknown. I think their basis at 3 years was 2,500, if I remember correctly. I don't have it with me. I see a nod yes here. The 325 is not realistic. I mean, anyone can go and look at what the prices are.
This may be asking, have you heard anything about the effect of the coming recreational or adult use establishments on their business model? Is there discussion about that in the groups you've been?
That particular company, or?
Well, in general,
In
because
general.
you're talking about their business model. If it, part of what we talked about is what the revenue stream would be.
Right. So, my guess, because I follow all of this and I've been following it for several years, my guess is that the medical piece is going to become smaller and smaller in the total marketplace if we're looking forward 3 or 4 or 5 years, for a couple of reasons. Because there's a lot of products, there's a lot of investigational products that are actually in investigation that are most likely going to be approved as probably a Schedule II or something in pharmacies, because the use of so that medical piece. And also in the regulations that came out, the companies can't make false claims. So to the extent that none of us really know, because the studies just haven't really been done, what exactly all of the medical uses are, these companies can't claim them either. So it becomes a very, and that's what it says in the guidance documents, whether that is the guidance, the CCC guidance documents. I kind of lost track of your question.
That's helpful. Well,
So-
you're talking about their market shares likely to decline, or you think there's a possibility?
And many of the ones that are medical many throughout the state have expressed an interest that they want to convert. So one that is not converting, or potentially may not convert, it depends on how Ashland chooses to go forward, is really not going to be competitive in that.
All right, thank you. Did
Okay.
you want to follow up?
I just wanted to, just comment. I think you did a good analysis, I think, of what we're driving at with some of our questioning of Tricome, because, what is the real viability of their business in a recreational environment? And, if let's assume we contractually limit them to medicinal only, and we can assume that they can't convert. So they're 100 yards away from the Framingham town line. What's to prevent a recreational facility opening up there? What's the impact? And my recollection, and you can go back and look at the film, is that the Tricome said that their business model was viable for medical marijuana only. Now, I don't necessarily buy that, but so I think you bring up a good analysis of kind of the dynamics that are going on here. And, to me, that was, there's some area there that just doesn't make sense at this point.
And then it's obviously important to talk to our neighbors, whether that's Sherburne or Hopkinton or Holliston and Framingham, to see what is really going on in the area, because obviously you
A
know,
number of the smaller towns south of us are all putting opt-outs of recreational, and they don't have medical either, except Holliston has growing facilities.
And
They won't
Medway-
have any,
Medway
and
also.
Medway has
Yeah.
growing as well.
I'm generally aware of a lot of that kind of stuff that's going on, but I think even in terms of planning, even if one town has it, how will towns work together on impacts, say, you know, positive and negative? So
Okay.
it's important to have those conversations.
All right, thank you, Judy. Thanks. Amy? Hi, Amy.
Hi. Amy Turncliffe, 21 Rossi Lane. I do want to say that I volunteer, as probably everybody knows, a lot of my time with Ashland's Youth Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, but I am not speaking on behalf of Decisions at Every Turn. I'm speaking as a resident who is I'm a trained neuroscientist, a PhD in neuroscience, a trained analyst in mental health and substance use disorders, and now turned public health advocate, I guess you would say. So I have spent, as I think you all know because you received the brunt of a lot of my work, a tremendous amount of my time now is spent in marijuana policy and marijuana education in particular, along with other substances. As you all know, there's a tremendous toll that addictive substances take on society, on individuals, both from personal costs, financial costs, families. So I think it's really important. This is an extremely important topic, and thank you for entertaining it. I wanted to just quickly start off with and this is in one of the documents I sent, but I just want to read this little passage, and it comes from the editor-in-chief of the American Society of Addiction Medicine, which I think is very relevant because it speaks to the fact that the FDA is there are processes in place for approval of cannabis-based medications, and we could get into CBD versus THC and the potencies and the different concentrations and whether or not there are greater risks with some than others. But I just want to read this, and it says, this is a contrary concerns around the use of medicinal marijuana. And it says, the implicit moral purpose of these laws, so medical marijuana laws, has been relief of suffering. While that purpose is commendable, its achievement must include procedures for validating both efficacy and safety. The history of medicine is replete with examples of raw plants, for example, the slippery elm, the foxglove, and there are others listed, which contain therapeutically useful substances such as aspirin, quinine, digitalis, and morphine, but which are themselves toxic and inconsistent in content. A medication's dynamics, effects, safe therapeutic range, and route of delivery and adverse effects must be known before it is used. Otherwise, it is unregulated research for an uninformed subject. So I just think it's really important to put it in context that the use of these medicines for the individuals does not come without risk to them. So that is without discussing the merits for or against of the individual components of the plant. What I want to speak to specifically is, and I only have one copy, and I did send this, but it's just examples of what we're talking about. Is that the siting of a medical marijuana business on Route 26 does not come without risks to our kids. And part of that is for a variety of reasons. And I've just, passing around some images of the types of products. And I know I had submitted a list of questions to be answered by the business. And I know that maybe some of my questions are coming from maybe a scientific place. But I asked a lot about THC potency, and will they be selling products with high THC content? Will they be selling edibles that are appealing to kids? We know from the tobacco industry and other industries that sell addictive products that they will often use products that are appealing to children. And as you can see from the images that I have sent prior and that I was passing around, they're very appealing. In fact, I had a friend came over, we were chatting, and he happened to see the pictures and said, wow, that looks awesome, I want that. I said, well, you just made my point for me. So I just want to say that the products don't come without risk, and there are been an increasing number of studies, scientific studies, showing that there is an increased risk of psychosis, an increased risk of suicide, and these risks are particularly for young users, for under the age of 25, which now we know the brain doesn't fully develop until about the age of 25. So you might say, but this is for adult use, and kids aren't going to be getting access. I can tell you that that's not the case. In conversations with a neuroscientist, with adolescent addiction medicine specialists, even here in Massachusetts, but in Colorado, that kids report accessing diverted marijuana or marijuana products, THC, high THC products most often, from businesses. Because we know from our Ashland Adolescent Health Survey data that kids are saying they are accessing diverted, alcohol, tobacco products, electronic vapor devices. It does happen. In fact, a report, and I sent this along too, was just released, and I think it was last week, that said a study in Colorado found that about 50% of youth in outpatient substance abuse treatment reported using diverted marijuana. So, and those are just individual, marijuana dependence is the number one substance for which youth seek treatment. So I think that kind of makes the point that it doesn't, what we're talking about doesn't come without risks for our kids. In fact, the Metro West Health Foundation did an analysis, a sub-analysis, and I think I sent this to all of you as well, showing that among, and this was for all marijuana youth who are marijuana users, and they talk about the data broken down even more, where when you have increased frequency of use, the risk of mental health issues is even higher than you would see users versus non-users kind of aggregate. So again, showing that use by our youth is not good. Okay, so what I would like to ask the board is that based on the guidance that Kopelman and Page recently put out, stating that the recreational law has several very important implications for the medical law, and they say the act. I would ask that you not take any action with Trichome Health or any other medical business through the end of our recreational moratorium. I think there are just too many uncertainties. Even the Cannabis Control Commission, and I've met with the chairman previously and a couple of the commissioners themselves, and legislators believe that there are likely going to have to be legislative fixes to provide more guidance for municipalities. So I would ask that we not rush into this. We don't know what the full breadth of the negative impacts on our community might be. And so let's go through the process. We can determine how Ashland as a town feels about recreational, and then we can kind of move through that process. The only other thing I would say is that the zone, and I was part of those zoning conversations when we zoned medical. When we zoned for medical, we zoned without, I can say for myself, knowing that there was a bigger vision for 126. We zoned medical, and I remember shortly thereafter going to the Pond Street visioning session, and I think it might have been at the Warren School, and I remember sitting there going, oh my gosh, we just got that wrong. And so, I think with all of the uncertainties, we don't need to rush to this. I don't think this will be our last opportunity to develop that property, which I think is important. And you said the town council has talked about contract law and all of that. The host agreement is for a set period of time. That does not go indefinitely. So you'd have to renegotiate that host agreement over time. And what other communities are finding is that once the medical businesses get in, then it's very hard to prevent them from moving to recreational, in part because they are going to have to, and they know that. And there was a recent analysis done about price. We were talking about price and what's happening with the price in Colorado. And in fact, I was at a conference in DC where a professional was saying the price is dropping out because the black market is still thriving. And then there are all of these businesses that are competing, and so they're able to drop the prices. So I think any revenue projections are really just projections. There's nothing behind it. I guess this may be the last thing I'll say. There was recently analyses done for Rhode Island and for Connecticut showing that the revenues that they take in don't nearly make up for the costs. So I think we know that and I have all that information here as well, and I've sent it. We know that for other substances as well.
Right.
So.
Thank you, Amy. Questions or clarifications for Amy?
I just want to make
Sure.
one statement, and I hear what you're saying, and you were commenting how, for medical marijuana, there's all these other side effects. You're hearing from the FDA, but we have to look at the fact that
Wait, did you say side effects?
You had mentioned that there's.
Are you talking about the statement I read?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was from the American Society of Addiction Medicine. That wasn't my statement.
Okay,
but
so, when you hear that statement, I also know that the FDA has approved many drugs.
I totally
that
agree with you.
The side effects
Yeah.
are worse
Yep.
than the original symptom.
I
would
do.
take that kind of statement with a grain of salt.
I agree.
So.
I think what concerns me is mostly, to be honest with you, I absolutely agree with you. And I've studied many of those.
Yeah.
What concerns me largely is the therapeutic window.
Okay.
And we really don't know. And since you brought it up, when Trichome was here, and the CEO was asked about the products, would you consider not selling high potency THC products?
Right.
And he said, well, absolutely not, because I have patients who have
Who need
PTSD
that,
and
right.
they need it.
Right.
And there is literature showing that, yes, lower doses of THC may help with PTSD symptoms in the short term, but they worsen them in the long term. And then when you blend in the high potency products, I think, and the potential for negative effects there, that's where I get concerned, is that no one knows, right? It really is just an experiment.
Okay.
Steve?
So, first of all, thank you for meeting with me a couple weeks ago. That was
thank you.
very helpful. But I just want to clarify something you said earlier about diversion of marijuana products to youth. And are you referring to medical marijuana products, or are you referring to
Both.
recreational?
Both. In conversation, so in Colorado, it happens from both. We don't actually collect, interestingly, we have not started collecting data here in Massachusetts. No one has, about where youth are accessing. When we have survey data, we have questions about where are you getting your tobacco products, where are you getting your vaping devices, and where are you getting your alcohol? We have not, and prescription drugs as well, but have not been asking about where are you getting your marijuana here in Massachusetts. So though we're hoping to get those on the next survey for 2018, but when I have spoken with adolescent addiction medicine specialists here in Massachusetts, they say that their patients are reporting they are getting diverted medical marijuana. Now, I can't quantify that. In Colorado, they do have a breakdown of it. I can't remember what it is. I can probably send it to you. So I don't know specifically whether
I got
it's...
enough Amy stuff.
Had a lot of reading to do, but it was all good.
All right, well, thank you, Amy.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
Anybody?
Mike.
I just had one question, Amy,
Yeah.
and I just want to go back to the statement from the American Society from Addiction
Yeah,
Medicine. And I just want to make sure I understand it. Are you saying because medicinal marijuana, or are they saying because medicinal marijuana has not been around that long, we don't know the long-term effects?
What
of that?
what they're saying is that there is a process for approval of prescription medications that includes collecting safety, efficacy data, so that you know you have to do dose escalation study, you have to know what the tolerated dose is, really define out what the potential side effects are, and that when you skip that process altogether, you don't know. And in addition, I think part of it was around the potential for contaminants and the potential for getting something different than what it's labeled, because you don't have the same types of strict guidance.
That process is not going to happen, though, is it?
Right. It's like an FDA trial takes.
They are doing. I think Judy mentioned there are at least two approved cannabis-based medications currently, and there are several in the clinical pipeline coming through that will come before
I'm
FDA.
sorry. So I guess the idea here is that you've asked us to wait. Are we going to know more about efficacy and?
Well, I'm not asking you to wait because of the merits of medical marijuana one way or the other. I'm asking you to wait is because
More legal reasons.
it's the legalities of it, and we have a moratorium on recreational. I understand that is a moratorium on recreational, but for me, and I think many across the state, right now you really can't parse them out, medical and recreational, because they're being all wrapped together with the new law. So the Cannabis Control Commission is going to work with DPH to transition that. And I think I sent along the
Right,
KP.
So in terms of the research, so one of the things you're saying is that there's not proven clinical trials, so we can't trust that this is gonna work right. But is there a process where that will ever happen? Is the fact that it's still illegal under federal law mean that no one's really doing these kind of studies?
I would say they are doing it now. Yeah, they are doing them. But again, that's not your thing.
I'm just
not
trying
arguing whether or
I'm
not.
just trying to figure out if we'll ever have proven
I think
effective medication based on
well,
medical marijuana type.
So I told you I was an analyst in mental health and substance use disorder. I actually started as a pain analyst. So the majority of prescriptions for medical marijuana are for pain, right? And so when I was analyzing that literature and all of that, those markets, there were several CBD-based medications that were that companies were investigating, as Judy was saying. And so they have been, investigated, or they have been in the process for quite some time, and that is still ongoing now. And it's just a matter of whether or not those trials are positive, and whether or not they can make it to market.
Thank you. Yolanda, did you want to make a comment? Or?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
I'm all set.
Oh, thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay.
My name's Kate Jerzik. I live at 11 Rodman Road. I guess I want to make one point following Amy, and I think Steve particularly mentioned about research, and I think we probably have one of the most knowledgeable people around and who has provided research, but I would say if there's other research that would, I think there's lots of people here, and I think I know lots of the people aren't for it, because of my neighborhood, and that was the other thing that, forget about 126 improving or not, but before I move off of that specific topic, we've actually paid for an economic development study, probably along with the 126 improvement. And this is a quote from that study, 2015 study. It says, quote, "As the face of Ashland for non-local users traveling Route 126 each day, it does not present the town as a high-quality community valued by its residents and public officials." So the same report suggested we seek higher quality development. And I'm wondering why the board thinks this would be higher quality development and how that would help Ashland. But I'm also specifically asking that the board does not do further negotiations or issue a letter of non-opposition, given that we're under the moratorium. And the problem for me with that is it's not very clear legally, and there's deep pockets in an industry to fight, and I don't think Ashland wants to go up against if we say it's medical only to convert or not. But I guess more importantly, our neighborhood knows well that controlled substances breed crime, and since I've lived there, there was a robbery at CVS for OxyContin, and the police were in my neighborhood chasing or potentially looking for the robber in the woods in my neighborhood. And I guess the controlled substance of alcohol fusion, we all know how that worked out for my neighborhood. And in addition, it just brought other drugs. So I really don't, we've had two things that just went bad, and I'm really hoping that there's not a third one brought to my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Kate.
you, Kate.
Hi, Shannon McDonald, Charles Street. I'm new here to the town. I've only lived here for a few years. We moved here from Rhode Island. When I lived in Rhode Island, I was a certified nursing assistant at a hospice where I took care of Alzheimer's patients. Through working there, I met a lot of people in the medical marijuana community, and I ended up working for RIPAC, the Rhode Island Patients Advocacy Coalition. While I was not a medical marijuana patient or marijuana user, I met a lot of people that needed help. As a nursing assistant and nursing student, I helped a lot of those people. My husband and I would go and help them in their gardens. We went to their meetings. We became caretakers for them. We saw firsthand the amazing things that this medicine was doing for these people. We saw children who had seizure disorders that could not get out of their bed actually be able to get into wheelchairs and attend classes for the first time. We have a member of our family that has Tourette's, that started taking medical marijuana as a way to calm their body twitches. It has helped them immensely. When you're talking about something that's literally saving lives of people, people get emotional, and I often look for intelligent, progressive communities to carry the load of things, because people that need it have to get that help from somewhere. And we've enjoyed our time in Ashland. I think that it's a great place. We actually have friends that come up from Rhode Island to go play paintball because we have good things. We Market Basket, I mean, cheap groceries, who does better than that, right? I think that this shop, I don't know about the business model, I haven't looked into it, but I have seen that the dispensaries in Rhode Island needed some help, and that it's a good thing to look into to make sure that everybody's on the up and up. I know that they were nonprofit, which is a big difference, and that they had a lot of responsibilities that the city of Providence had to take in opening their medical marijuana section. But I also saw that it worked a lot of the time, and that growing your own medicine is not feasible for a lot of people. Electricity is expensive, cooling is expensive, nutrients is expensive. This people that need medicine. We're not talking about the same people that are, growing seeds in their closets with regular lights. These are special ventilation systems. You have to have electricians come in and make sure that these things are safe. So dispensaries are the best ways for a lot of people to get quality medication. As this woman was reading with her thing, if you don't know your medicine's content, then you don't know a lot about it. There are different strands, and that's why having a professional is so important. Thank you.
Great. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
Very
you.
helpful. Okay. Go
Paul
ahead.
Kendall, 25 Olive. I'm also a member of the school committee. I am not speaking on behalf of the school committee. So first, I want to thank Mr. Kerrigan and Amy for the work they've done. I think that's great. I won't get into how I personally feel about this, but I want to speak more to the messaging. So I think it's very clear from all the other things like alcohol and different things that there is an impact on the kids when things are legalized, or there's a perceived lessening of effect, right? So there's that. And so I think to the young lady's point that was just up here, there are dispensaries currently operating in Massachusetts. They deliver. It's not that somebody wouldn't be able to get it if we deny this, right? So it's not about that. But to take Sarah's comment earlier, what is Ashland? I think it's too early to act on this. I know town council said that there might be some contract law that we could argue. My concern there is we open this door a crack. We let them in. They have a lot deeper pockets than we do. Not Tricone, but make no mistake about it. The industry would use that and fund the heck out of them. We don't have $7 billion behind us. We're in a good financial state right now. We would have to throw a lot of that out the window to try to win that. So what would happen if we lose? I don't see a lot of upside to that. So as a member of the school committee, I'm very concerned with the impacts to the kids. Anyone who says that this is for adults, alcohol is diverted, opioids are diverted. Would this really be the first thing that's not diverted to kids? I think that's a foolish argument to make. So this will absolutely be diverted to those that it's not intended for. Again, I think there's avenues where people can get that. So it's not, hey, if you don't get it in Ashland, you're not going to get it. I think that we don't want to be the town that has to fight that legal battle if we let this door open. And if on its face they don't seem like they have a great business model, do we want a business even in here that, regardless of what it's doing, that's going to fail? So I would urge the board to not enter into any agreement at this point. You know, then there's obviously the 126 considerations and things like that. So I think there's too many unknowns and there's a lot of risk, in my opinion. And as a school committee member, I'm keenly aware and concerned with the impact that it would have on our kids and the message that it would send to say, hey, if we can put an opt-out on the ballot, we can win that opt-out, and we don't move forward in something like this. I think that messaging helps to mitigate the messaging that legalization and things like that can have an impact on. So, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I just one question, and I guess it's kind of general question to the group. I mean, I have no, certainly not questioning the statistics about diversion and how our youth would acquire this. How do you manage the personal cultivation part of this? I mean, right now it's legal to grow plants at home. So how does a community manage that particular element? Judy?
Jump. On Tuesday at Wellesley, I could share the link with you if you're interested. The Mass Association of Health Boards is having an open session. The attorney that works with the Mass Association of Health Boards, and I understand it's about 10 different towns, and I want to say they're pretty much cities, but Sam Wong from Framingham and Cheryl Sabaro are conducting an information session with a packaged proposal of regulations that can be adopted by the local boards of health, because there are a lot of questions, even because home grow has been around now for over a year, 15 months, December of 2016, right? So, I mean, we could have even questions or things that need to be addressed out there happening right now. So hopefully that will be some place we can bounce off, but I would be happy to send the link to you.
Yes, please.
I actually submitted for my fee to be reimbursed, and it's also available in a webinar, so people can listen to it. You can listen to it at home for $20 or $30 participation.
Good,
Thank you, Judy.
One thing I wanted to add, because there was a question about, well, why might we want to consider this weight thing? Because as I'm sure you all know, that the Department of Public Health now oversees the medical the medical part of it, and the Cannabis Control Commission is overseeing the non-medical. Yet the intent is that during the summer, in the next several months and throughout this year, the Cannabis Control Commission will be taking over all of it, and it'll be all of it, including the medical, will be under their umbrella. So that is one question mark exactly. Those guidances that will come out of them, out of the CCC going forward, will not be ready until, within a short period of time, a year, but not today.
All right, thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Other folks that want to speak on this? How are we doing for time here? Anybody check the weather outside? Are we okay?
It's
We're
Blizzard?
gonna get an
9
update.
feet of snow.
Okay, very good.
Janet Platt, Rodman Road. Good evening.
Oh, just a note, unless you want to, you don't need to give your address. We'll go with whatever your,
Okay.
It's required.
helpful.
it is helpful, it's not required.
We
usually was.
require it.
Really? Okay. I'm the chair. I'm
for the,
yeah.
for the
addresses.
for the names.
Sure.
Street name.
If
Yeah.
you're,
Yeah.
feel free to
It's
give
all
it or
good.
not give
I
it.
hit it.
you know.
So, my understanding is that this conversation is about a particular business asking for a letter of non-opposition, right?
Potentially.
But that's what it's about.
Yeah,
It's
let
not,
me-
it's not about whether we've voted for marijuana to be in Ashland, and it's not about whether people can grow it in their homes, right? It's about this business's letter of non-opposition. And my understanding is the only entity that could gain from that is the business, right? Like, we don't, Ashland doesn't have anything to gain from writing this letter.
Well, we're negotiating, we started
Terms.
negotiating an agreement with them that would involve revenue.
And if we don't write the letter, we can't negotiate
That's
with them?
correct. Yeah, we have that ability under the regulations to
Well, it's the other
give
way
them.
around.
So we wouldn't have the ability to negotiate with them
No,
if
we're
we
doing
don't
that-
write a
we're doing
letter
that
of
first, Janet.
non-opposition?
We're negotiating a host agreement first, prior to the potential of a
Non-opposition.
non-opposition, a letter of non-opposition. So we're doing, understand the negotiation up front, and then the letter, if it meets our approval as a community, we may or may not provide a letter of non-opposition.
Okay, so in that case, I think it is, I think it's difficult to offer the promise of a letter until we know what the town is gonna say, right? I mean, because you're representing the town, and the town's taking a vote in May.
Are you referring to recreational? Okay.
Well, yeah, but they go hand in hand, and the law isn't clear on it. And,
So this, right now, this discussion is on medical. And to your point, yes, there is a company before us, and part of this discussion has come out because we've let the public know, we're talking with this company about them looking for us for a letter of non-opposition.
okay,
It's separate from the discussion of opting out for recreational marijuana, which will be happening in the spring. In regards that, one is the medical, which is, already allowed, we have it zoned, so we're talking about this about this, but the recreational piece is still part of the discussion. And I think,
Okay.
for me anyway, one of the issues that has come up is that ambiguity of how easy would it be for a company that is licensed medical, that we've zoned for medical, that we say, okay, how easy it would for them to then become recreational, if as a community, there's that possibility that we decide to opt out. And even if, and then
Right, could they
the
do an end
ambiguity
run around
of,
that?
even
Yeah.
if we do opt out,
They're already in.
because they're in, and could they use, to someone's point, a lot of money to then say, well, we're already in your community as a medical, even though you've opted out, there might be a different set of people sitting here in 5 years, or a community, so the discussion is all related.
exactly, it is, and it's also, there's a lot of moving pieces,
Yeah.
and they really are moving because it hasn't been established yet, right?
And to the point that, yes, the Cannabis Control has put out the regulations, but we all know that some of those regulations are ambiguous.
Well, they haven't figured
And
out
there
how
are
to
other
enforce them
things.
yet, right?
So,
All right.
anyway.
Okay, because,
Point
like,
taken.
I've been trying to figure out, is it this property or this business, right? And if it's this business, I don't think as a town, we've really figured out what we want to do about these businesses, right? We have them zoned, but, like, I don't think we've given a lot of thought about where we're gonna put them. Is this the best place for it? And for who is this the best place? Like, maybe the best place is over there across from Tom's Auto Body, right? Like, maybe the best place is over by the police station, but it's not zoned for that. Maybe the best place is over by the I don't know, across from the train station, so when people come home, they can take a hit. Like, but we haven't had any town discussion about where we want to put these businesses, and I think we need to do that. And I know you're negotiating because you're trying to bring businesses into town, but I just don't feel like the town is ready for this at this time. I know I personally am not. I teach in the city, like I teach in Boston, I teach a lot of kids that come in high. And you don't have the same experience teaching kids when they're high. They don't also remember the stuff you teach them when they come back. So I am afraid of normalizing marijuana. I'm not opposed to people having relief from their pain. I really am not. But I am very leery about normalizing marijuana. And if we get our foot in the door through medical marijuana and then have unintended consequences, we'll be living with them for generations. And so personally, I'm requesting caution and slowing down the pace and waiting until we have more information and not supporting this at this time.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Have we gone through the whole list, Tony? That's all right. No one else has, why should you?
Well, I have nothing to say. Tony Lewis, Washington Ave. I saw something on the internet tonight about that the number of medicinal marijuana stores is tied to the number of liquor stores in the town, and I think it was like 20% of the liquor stores, you have to have that many medicinal marijuanas. If you have one, you have to check it out, but that's just something for you to pursue.
Recreational.
I think that's recreational.
That's recreational,
No, I thought it was
Tony.
medicinal.
No, that's
Okay.
recreational. See, and that's one of the challenges here, and it's hard to do, I think, to go to Janet's point, that it's, it's blended together, and it is hard to separate the medical from the recreational, but that's what we have to try to do that.
Okay. I know there's a lot of regulation that has to be done with this. Will the town do it, or is it done by the state, or we don't know yet? Like
The regulations are in place, but I think people are concerned that there may be some changes, and it's gonna go to the Cannabis Control Committee, but.
Like
Some-
who
but some of
monitors it?
Some of the local control that you have with, say, liquor licenses, right?
Okay.
It's not there, or it's different for the cannabis than it is for liquor. And the big thing right now for medical is there are some things they have to do, that if a company wants to go into a town or a city, they have to, now they have to have a host agreement. That was one of the things that was changed after the original law. And then to be able to even go for their licensing with the state, they have to have a letter of non-compete from the town that they're trying to set up in.
Okay.
So that's for medical. For recreational, it's different.
Okay. Well, you guys have been researching it quite a bit, so I respect that quite a bit. My wife says sit down.
If you have more to say,
Go ahead, Tony.
everyone else has been able to say.
Did someone?
Ellen's looking back there.
Should we take a vote on this one?
Well, you all remember what happened with that compounding company in Framingham. There was a lot of issues. I see similarities here. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we have to be aware of that for ourselves.
So just this is a dispensary, so they're not manufacturing, they're not cultivating. That's the proposal. So it's different than a manufacturing facility or like a compounding company.
Okay.
So there is a difference, and so
Okay,
just
good.
be careful of that.
So to that point, this company has licensing for a growing facility in
Lakeville.
Lakeville,
Mass. And they've already been licensed to do a medicinal marijuana dispensary in Auburn.
Okay, so it's not a startup company. At least they have some experience.
Gonna go
Okay, just remember, quality of life in our neighborhood.
on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Tony.
very much.
Thanks, Tony.
Appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Vilma Brunel, Rodman Road.
Everybody's ignored my advice about their address. Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Piggyback on what was said, and from past experience, we have, as a town, tend to be, what's the best word? Short-sighted. We need to look at the big picture. Now, I have to admit, the legal part of it, I am not as aware of. But let's look at the big picture and let's see what this is morally going to bring to our town. We have had in our neighborhood experience already with a business, with a fusion. We have yelled and screamed since day one. They've been giving 1, 2, 3 opportunities, and it's proven that, yeah, we should have said no from day one, because what we were expecting to happen, happened. So again, let's look at the big picture, let's look at the future, and let's see how that is going to impact us. Now, I wanted also to mention something that Steve mentioned earlier as to growing in their people's own home and what's the difference with the dispensary. That's a huge difference. I mean, do I like it? No. Am I gonna go in someone's house and tell them what to do? Absolutely not. Do I like people getting drunk? No. Will they get drunk in their house and fall asleep on their couch or their floor? That's their business. However, a dispensary is gonna bring a lot of people into that. So that is part of the community. And it's not only gonna bring people from Ashland, it's gonna bring, if we look just our towns around us, Hopkinton, Holliston, Medway, and there's a couple of other towns that are opted out as well. So it's not just our youth and our community, it's the other people that we are going to bring. So let them grow at their house and do whatever they want at their house, but not in our community. That's all, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, of course.
And I won't say what street I live on.
Oh, shoot.
Louise
Okay.
Abraham.
Hi, Louise.
My question is very simple. All the people here would like you to consider our opinion and to not at this time allow that. I don't see a whole lot of people here who are for it. I would like to know who is making this final decision, the Board of Selectmen or the town manager?
In
Is
terms
that a
of
question?
the decision
It's the
for-
Board of Selectmen.
It's the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Yeah.
And the Board of Selectmen is elected by the people of the town.
Correct.
And the townspeople are speaking that we would ask you to not push this through at this time.
Thanks, Louise.
Thank you, Louise.
Okay, so,
Miles has his hand up.
yeah, Miles, what?
Actually just gonna hop up.
Oh, I thought that was some kind of
there
video
was a
signal.
signal for us
Yeah, I
or
thought I
something.
thought I had a countdown.
I thought you ran out of tape.
So you're speaking as a citizen.
Yeah, so my name Miles Garnett. I guess I don't have to give a street. I'm not representing WACA-TV. So I just had a question about just the letter of non-opposition itself. I know at the previous meeting that came up, I think there was like the idea of, what exactly is it they're being asked to not be opposed to? Is that mainly just the sort of like our negotiation tactic to get them to sort of
No, Mike,
You wanna
you want
explain
to
it, Michael?
Yeah, so it's, a letter of non-opposition is required from the community for any applicant that is looking to open a medicinal marijuana facility in that community. And so what that does is that triggers the ability for that company to go through the rest of the process with DPH and then also the local zoning authority or the local special permit granting authorities, so.
Okay. I just want sort of clarity.
So it's
on that.
required.
Okay.
It's something that's
I
required.
think in the last meeting, Miles, we talked a bit, with regard to this anyway. We talked about, and this goes to Janet's comments too. There's a host agreement and there's a letter of non-opposition. They're two different things. And, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we were asked to provide a letter of non-opposition and then negotiate a host agreement. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to at least discuss what terms might be in a host agreement as I understood it. And And if we were satisfied with that, then we would consider a letter of non-opposition. And so, and neither one of them have been arrived at yet. So we don't have a letter. We had a draft of a host agreement. It was explained to us at the last meeting that that was doing things backwards. We thought it wasn't doing things backwards. And so then at that point, I think we decided that we needed to have, before this went any further, we needed a public discussion about this, and that's why we're here tonight.
Okay, I just figured I just want sort of clarification on that, just so.
All right, thanks.
So-
Okay, thanks,
But-
Lawrence.
And also, just to go further on that, now it has changed, I believe, that before a company can get a letter of non-opposition to present to the state, they have to show that they have a host
community
agreement. So previously, it was whatever way you want it. Now they have to have a host agreement before they get the
Well,
letter
it
of
seems like
non-opposition,
logically
which makes
that
much
makes
more
sense,
sense.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the way we're doing it. Very good. Okay, so I think, is that it, Miles? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yep.
I think so.
I think so.
I think it is anyway.
I'm George Dorsey from 37 Captain Ames Circle. I'd just like to ask a question. Say if a medical marijuana facility arrives, what's the guarantees that it will only be these heartrending cases that this lady mentioned about, you know, people who are nearly near death and this revives them, or that people who have this huge, incredible pain and this lets them function? I mean, how many what percentage of the customers will be that type versus Joe Dokes who says doctor, won't you give me a prescription? Instead of aspirin, how about if I get some medical marijuana? You know, in other words, is this going to be a substitute for aspirin? In which case, the crowd, and what's the track record of that in Colorado, for instance? I don't know for sure. I have my intimation, I have my hunch about what the track record is in Colorado.
Okay.
It goes through the roof.
I think there's
Okay,
someone who might have the
so
answer to
I
that.
just think, I don't feel there's a big comfort in saying, oh, it's only medical marijuana, it's only don't worry, it's only these people, you know, whatever. Okay, I think it's like,
So
it's
you're
semi-opening
skeptical about
doors.
the
That's all.
marijuana card. Okay, thank you.
Can I speak
Amy,
to that?
yeah, yep.
So
Is
in-
there a doctor in the room?
Buried in one of the documents I sent was, has been some information about this, and he's right. That data coming out of Colorado has shown and this is why I said I don't want to get into the merits and not, because quite frankly, if I thought every single person who was walking into a dispensary was getting it for palliative care, was improving their quality of life, so be it, right? And if no kids were going to get it, and that it was all going to be in this nice and tidy package, absolutely 100%, okay? But that's not the reality, unfortunately. And there is data out of Colorado showing, yes, it's diverted, and yes, unfortunately, that the majority of individuals are using for recreational purposes.
And do you think that trend will continue?
It's already
even with-
happening here.
No,
It's-
but
it's already happening.
If we're starting recreational and adult use facilities, and they will be nearby, they're not going to be very far away. Do
Well-
you think that pattern will continue for? I mean, it seems we're doing two things. One, we're questioning their
Yeah.
business model because they won't have
Yeah.
any customers,
Yeah.
and then we're saying they're going to continue to
Right.
have those customers who are misusing it. So,
I
which
think-
way is it going to go?
I think it's still a mix in Colorado, and they have a mix there too. So there are some people who will continue to use their medical card for recreational, but you have to remember we're talking about. I still will challenge you and say it's highly unlikely that if we let them, and because the first time they came to us, they said we have never any intention of converting, and then a host agreement is here and says, well, if we want to convert, we'll ask for permission, right? So I would caution you to think that they will never become or
Okay,
ask.
but-
Wasn't there another point brought up, I don't know if it was from some of the material you gave or something else, that medical marijuana does not have the same taxation
That's right.
as recreational
That's right.
marijuana.
That's
So if
correct.
I have my medical marijuana card, even if recreational is available,
You might go.
I'm gonna continue
That's
using my
right.
medical marijuana card so that I
Which
don't
is
have
what
to
some
pay
people-
Okay,
taxes.
so that
Which doesn't generate
That goes to
the
the
tax
point.
benefit. that-
Right. So that's exactly correct, and
you mean
it's
it's
really
deductible? Is that what?
Well, it's
It's
medical,
the
so, and
price
it's, and
is
it's less
reduced.
It's a
expensive than
deductible.
recreational
Okay,
because
so
it doesn't
that-
have the
all right.
taxes.
Yeah, that's
So
correct.
I think you're suggesting that the pattern is, if there's people doing it now, that a certain number of them will
Yeah,
remain.
that's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
All right, thank you. All right, so I think that's it for the public testimony or input. I'm going to turn over to the board for comments or thoughts or questions from the board. I don't know, I guess we can start with Mr. Mignani over here.
Did you bring a cot?
God. I get a weather, yeah.
I don't know, that's
Well,
not
you're
really
gonna be
anything to do
quick,
with
though. I
No,
mean,
I-
you've got your, we may have heard from you in the past on this.
You
so I'm
have.
just trying
You heard in the past, and, you know, and it's been, I spent my entire career keeping individuals, students and kids from using illegal substances. Whether the medical marijuana will become available to them, that remains to be seen. Studies have indicated that it is diverted to them. All I can tell you is that very recently, the Boston Globe did their own little research, and this was on March 17th, just a few days ago. It says that marijuana companies will be banned from a majority of cities and towns in Massachusetts. A Globe review found that the latest indication that there were fewer pot stores in the early going than many consumers expected. At least 189 of the state's 351 municipalities have barred retail marijuana stores in most of their cases, cultivation facilities, and other cannabis operations, according to the local news reported to the Boston Globe. 59 of the local bans of marijuana are indefinite. The remaining 130 are temporary moratoriums, which is what we currently have right now. And many are to expire July 1st. The rest are due later in the year, which is what we're at right now. So again, I go back to the fact that we're still waiting for a more complete look and review of how we should be doing things and guidelines should be set. And I think we should wait. I think we should wait. Do I want to see it in this community? I have my personal views, and I don't want to taint the board's opinion by me saying this, that, or anything else. I think you already know where I stand with that. I think people out there know where I stand with it. So I don't need to reiterate, you know, how I feel. There's been enough studies. I read a book by James Akari, who originally started his research on legalizing certain drugs, one of them being marijuana. Upon his research, and he did a 10-year research study before he wrote his book, he finally realized that they should not legalize it. But of course, that went in abeyance when the state passed this law. And to be very honest with you, I think one of the reasons why we're in the state that we're in, of, you know, not knowing where we're going, is that I don't think people actually thought that was gonna pass. I really don't think so. And here we are. It passed, and now we need to catch up and do something. Doesn't mean that we have to follow what everybody else is doing. We could be different. Ashland has been known to be different. I don't see how we can't stay different. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Joe. Yolanda, did you want to?
Yeah, I, when this first came before us, and certainly when medical marijuana, I felt that there were some benefits to medical marijuana. I also thought that for this particular location, this is a lot that certainly could be improved. And I think if the building looked nice and was a real retail, I don't know that it would be a negative impact necessarily on 126. But as I started doing more research and as I started following some of what was going on with the CCC, and then the possibility that this medical marijuana facility, which I think there is a need for, whatever your belief is, I think there are people who feel that it is helpful for them for whatever reason. But knowing that there is that possibility, it could easily become a retail location, I'm having second thoughts. And also, there is medical marijuana going to be available in Framingham. So I don't know that this location in Ashland is needed if they could go a few miles further to get to medical marijuana in Framingham. So that's where I'm at right now. No final determination, but that's where I'm looking at right now.
Okay. Steve?
Well, I guess in a lot of ways, very, very much mixed feelings about this. To go to what Joe was referencing, I think the big challenge, and I read that article as well, that had to do with recreational marijuana. And, I think one of the challenges we have is just focusing on the viability of medical dispensary in Ashland. I think that's what we're talking about. That's what we should stick to. But my concerns are the viability of the business. Judy talked about that earlier. So, when I evaluate the potential company coming in, is it truly viable, and will it work long term? And I do take to heart the concerns about the Cannabis Control Commission, where they're at, how they're integrating the regulations, how they're interacting with DPH, and so I think caution is a good word to use here, a good way of approaching this. But I have to also reconcile it with the fact that, and I believe there's maybe 29 states now that have legalized medical marijuana. And I believe there's a number that are on track to do so over the next couple of years. But besides that, I've seen, like we all have, as Joe mentioned earlier, there's stats on everything, but it seems like there is a very, very high, and Amy, you can correct me, like an acceptance of medical marijuana within the United States that exceeds like 90% acceptance as a, it seems like we're starting to see medical organizations that aren't embracing it, but they're acknowledging the fact that there are benefits to be had. So again, those are kind of the thoughts in my head. I do think, even though it's not the most important part of the analysis, there is a tax, a revenue, and a mitigation piece to this that I think needs to be considered as part of this. And again, it may not be the most important thing, but it may give us an opportunity to do a number of things in the community, whether it's to help diversion programs or whether it's to help development on 126. So, I'm just describing some of the thoughts in my head. I certainly haven't made up my mind. What I really would like to see is what a potential host agreement would look like, and then be able to make a much better informed decision.
Okay, thanks.
Does she want to comment on what Steve said?
All right, I will, okay, Amy, a quick comment, please. Do you want to comment?
Well, he just, Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, he did give you an opening.
Give you the opening.
You left the door open for me. I don't know what you expected there. I won't say you're wrong. So no major medical association has endorsed medical marijuana.
I didn't say endorsed.
But, no, I know. So what they've said is, what I said is that they are acknowledging that there are likely medical benefits from some components of the marijuana or cannabis plant in some mixtures, right? Because there's also the mixture of THC to CBD is important. So that's what they've said.
Yeah,
is that what they've said is, but there is a process to ensure that it's
Right.
in the correct.
Yeah, and I didn't
mix.
want to indicate that any organization, because I haven't seen any either,
No,
that
there
has
aren't any.
actively endorsed, and even like the Veterans Administration.
Yeah, 'cause there are
speak
some
to-
real
because,
concerns.
right, they speak to the potential
Yep.
of benefits. They
Yep.
don't endorse it,
Yeah.
they can endorse it.
Yes, that's right.
So-
And there's a few reasons for that, and part of that too is around what, like I said, sometimes concerns about worsening of
Right.
symptoms if they endorse.
So,
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing you said was money going towards prevention, like you kind of indicated that.
I'm indicating that
Yeah.
there's
There's good
a
things that you do with the
potential
money.
I do.
revenue stream that could be
I
used for a
know.
variety of things.
I know.
I didn't say.
I understand. It's just very hard, I think, for folks who are public health professionals to hear that, because you want to apply the money that where you could have prevented it in the first place, you then want to apply the money to the downstream effects.
Well-
And so
Well,
it's-
this money wouldn't, we
anyway,
wouldn't do it if we thought
Amy,
there was ill
my
effect.
only comment would be, if we, don't have any facilities in Ashland, we're still gonna have the problems. We're still gonna have the
I-
problems because we live in the world.
I don't disagree with you, but I do believe we increase our risks for a lot of the reasons that everyone has cited here tonight. So,
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks.
Carl? Carl, what, can we, Judy, yeah, can we just, well, Carl, why don't you go ahead?
It's next month.
Okay, I have a few things, and I'll make it quick. I know that I wanted to recognize the fact that we, over the years, have had a hard time getting citizens' participation at town meeting or about a number of agenda items. So, given the response in the last month, I would suggest that we add the word marijuana to every agenda item from now on.
That's great.
So that we can attract attention and draw people to town meeting.
That's good.
I would also like to, and I wanted to give kudos to Sarah Hines about an hour and a half ago for bringing the term agnostic to the discussion, which I had not heard before, but I think that it's an important word, because I think, now going forward here, I think these are the issues that we as a board need to discuss. And I think it's important that we take an agnostic approach towards our personal view of marijuana use. And thank you, Sarah, for bringing that up. So with that in mind, I would suggest that we have to deliberate on, is this in the best interest of the town? And there's a lot of discussion around that. We're not going to cover that tonight. If we feel that it is the best interest of the town, is this zoned correctly? And do we have to revisit that idea? And if we think that this is an important component to the town, have we zoned it correctly, and do we need to revisit that? The third issue is it consistent with our vision statement, with our own, the thing that we read every week when we come here? And I'm not giving my opinion yes or no, I'm just saying that we have to come to an agreement as a board on these questions. We did get some input from Chief Davis, and that was something that wasn't brought up tonight, but it goes to public health and safety, and it goes to public health and safety in a very different issue, in the fact that this is a cash-only business. And there's something about a cash-only business that's a little bit unnerving.
Just on the medical aspect of it.
Just as a side note, there is a bank in Massachusetts that will support this business, so
Okay,
it's
well, it
not
was
just a
described
cash-only
to us
business.
as a
Right.
cash-only business.
That was the
and it-
chief's impression.
And it was the chief's comment.
Might be wrong.
And the other issue, so we would have to have that clear then. I mean, is this a cash business or is it not a cash business? And to your point, Steve, someone asked about the conversion, and I guess it was Janet was talking about the business model, or somebody was talking about the business model. And my recollection was different from yours. I thought that they said that if we did not opt out, that they would have a hard time competing with neighboring towns, and that they would like the opportunity to come back to us to convert, which would support the fact that they couldn't compete with recreational marijuana if it were only medicinal. And my final point was something that we've talked about ad nauseum this evening, is the ambiguity involved in the regulations. There's a whole lot of stuff here, and I think that this is borne out in our town council's opinion. I think that she did the best that she could trying to make sense out of something that it's hard to make sense out of, because there is so much ambiguity in it. And I think that we would be doing a disservice to ourselves as a board and to the town if we make a decision without clarity on those ambiguities. So that's all I have.
Okay. All right, thanks. Well, my impressions are, I think we were kind of already aware, and we've heard some tonight about reasons to go slow, and I think there is legitimacy to that. Because of I'm a little skeptical about, the marketplace is changing, the regulations seem to be a bit in flux. And a lot of, as a public official, we have to try to do the responsible thing, and You know, there's, on the side, the reason that we did this proposal in the first place is that, you know, there is potentially substantial revenue attached to this. So, that was one of the factors that we're looking at. And, you know, revenue in the town allows us to do things, I think, that people all agree that we should be doing, and that is important. So if we're gonna give that up, or we're going to evaluate, we have to see if it's realistic. I'm not sure how realistic it is. I mean, we'd need to get some more information. I think for that, we need time. And then we have to evaluate what are the real benefits and the real negatives. I've heard some things that are, I'm not totally convinced about the negatives people have talked about. You know, a nice-looking building in that location, I don't see the big drag on our commercial development that would, I understand the issues of diversion that could happen, and that's something we'd have to look at very closely. But we're in a region that's gonna be, other towns will have recreational, other towns will have medical. Framingham has it now. So that we can just be totally isolated and give up all the potential benefits, and it's gonna make a big difference, I don't see that, frankly. But, you know, I think there are reasons, and I think, you know, I think Luis made the point that, I mean, yes, we have a lot of people, and we've heard of people who were against this, but this medicinal marijuana was passed overwhelmingly in the state and in this town. I think if you talk to a large group of people, they're either, well, I think it's probably okay, or they're actively in favor of it. Those people are not talking to us, but we know they're there. I think if you talk to your friends and neighbors, you'll hear the same thing. So, but I do agree that we haven't answered all the questions here, and that we're probably not at this moment ready to go forward. There are too many questions left, I think, on this. So, but I certainly appreciate the point of view that people have made. I just want to say that I don't necessarily agree 100% with some of the points that have been made here today. But I do see the need for a go slow approach, given the unknowns in the marketplace and what we're depending on these people to do in terms of their business model. So it doesn't, you know, in short, it doesn't make sense to go ahead with the potential negatives if we are uncertain of the positives, and to be able to evaluate that. So that's my kind of impressions and instructions. So.
So do you want me to continue discussions with Tricom? Do you want me to wait now? Do you want me to wait until after the referendum vote on May 15th? Do you think that, based on what you've heard from Tricom and what you know, that it might not be a good
Yeah,
fit?
well, personally, so I think, you know, we've talked about the potential business model being in flux. We have talked about the referendum and how it might affect. We've got the legal issue with the conversion, which I think, you know, I don't think anyone here is in favor of recreational marijuana in this town. So, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that's the sense of the board. So if those are real concerns, I think, speaking for myself, I think we shouldn't be finalizing anything until things have played out a bit, you know, so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would suggest that we probably defer discussions until after the referendum vote.
I agree with that.
You know, as then I think we might have more clarity from the state. We may have more clarity from Tricom to really get a better handle on their business model, and really, is it realistic that they could exist in just purely a medical world? So.
Well, not being at the second meeting that Tricom was here, I did read the article in the paper with respect to that. And what bothered me more than anything else was the fact that they pushed back when the board suggested that, you know, they just stay, you know, medical. And they didn't, you know, they kind of weren't easy. They weren't happy with that. They wanted the option, though. They would like to consider having that option available to transfer over. Well,
and I think for that, it's, you know, the possibility that, you know, has been brought up here, and some of the research we've all done is, if you're gonna stay medical, it's gonna potentially impact your business, right? Once retail is out there and adult use is more available and more readily available, that they're, how are they gonna stay viable as a business if they're just medical?
Well, then don't come in with the guys saying that that's what
Well,
they're gonna do.
because I think, because that's.
I'm sorry, because that's lying to me. I'm sorry.
It's-
You don't
but
lie
I
to
don't
the
know that it's
board.
lying, Joe, right? It's, I think that.
It's negotiation.
Yeah, we have to
Yeah, right,
evaluate.
they're,
Well,
they're
there-
thinking
there's-
that they can stay medical, but now things are changing.
Well, no,
Getting
I
to
think,
the-
I think they had, I think they had a plan right from the get-go, and the plan was, we go in
I
with
just-
medical, and then once we're
Okay.
in, the doors open and we transfer
So,
over.
so Michael, do you think you have enough feedback here? Or any other, I don't know if there's anyone else wanted to?
Yeah, I do, totally.
Okay.
Wow,
It's,
that was
We're all
mind-blowing.
running out of gas here, I think.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah.
no, I think it's perfectly fine to wait until after the referendum. I think that, like you said, will give you some clarity,
Right.
you know. I just want to say, I've had a couple conversations with Amy, and, I mean, if I've appeared like I've wanted to press one position or another on the board, I apologize
You
for
look like
that.
you wanted to jump out the window.
That's becoming the
But,
norm,
all right.
I think.
More and more.
All right,
But,
so,
my job is, if you want to move
Sure.
forward with a host community agreement, or at least have one to
we
look
need to
at
give you
help make your
guidance on that,
decision,
yeah,
I'm going to get the best one
sure.
for you that I can get, so.
So do we
I
need to
appreciate
make,
that.
do we need
I
to
don't-
take a vote
I
or
don't
anything?
think
or-
so.
Well, I-
No, you-
Before you do that, I mean, my second question was, if this is a positive thing for the town, should we rezone? And if the answer to that is yes, then we don't want to negotiate a host agreement for that spot. If we think that we want to rezone the town for this
For medical.
purpose.
Well,
I think
anyone-
Steve has the point of, let's maybe put it back on an agenda for a further discussion, now that we've heard from the public, but not make a decision until after the referendum.
and zoning would be part of that.
I would almost say then let's wait to have further discussion until after the referendum, right? And find out what happens in regards to recreational.
Fine with that, too.
Would certainly, that would inform
Which
our
is what Steve
discussion.
And I
originally
think we
asked.
should also make an effort to individually to, reach out to other community members as well to
Right.
get a sense
Of
of.
where other people are
Yeah,
at, right?
yeah.
And I just want to reiterate that I think that it's important that we not consider our personal views of marijuana use, but we attempt to approach this on what is in the best interest of Ashland.
Which,
Fair
And
enough.
as
and
we do
maybe
with
it's,
everything.
you might think that that's difficult to do, but I think that we need to do that.
Okay,
Okay,
all right. So I
moving on.
certainly thank all you folks for coming out and giving us the benefit of your opinions. So I think if you understand, we're putting off any action at this time. And until we have more clarity, both regulatory and what the town will vote. So I hope that resolves things, at least for the time being, with everybody, and thank you for coming in. So it's what I think.
Appreciate your input.
I think we all appreciate the effort and the that people put into this and your opinions. So thank you. The students too.
The students, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, thank you. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Motion to go past 10 o'clock.
Oh,
Already?
You get 2
should we
minutes.
take,
We got 2 minutes,
Got
might as well
2
vote
minutes.
it now and.
yeah, and should we take a quick
Just a
break?
2-minute, yeah.
And do I have a second, sir?
Second, to go past 10.
A quick
I don't
break.
want
Let's
to,
get this
but-
stuff done and get out of here.
Well, one of the members has asked for a 3-minute break. Can we do that?
All right, do we
We
have a
need to-
vote?
I made a motion, Joe seconded it, we need to
All
vote
those
it.
in favor of going past 10
Aye.
o'clock,
Aye.
say aye. Aye.
Opposed? No.
Opposed? No.
We're not
One
gonna get everything done in
opposed.
2 minutes, Carl.
Hi, Steve.
10:15.
What?
10:15.
Well, I guess I'll go see if anybody's still willing to talk to me out there.
You're toast.
have a question for you on the development.
we're gonna do a review of the 2018 annual town meeting warrant articles.
Yep, and you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Ready, go.
There's a lot of them. Go ahead, Mr. Town Manager. What the hell?
Now, you
where's
know
my
that's gonna
list?
go off, and it's gonna make that noise again.
That's right, that's what I'm telling you. Just hurry up.
All right.
What are you
This is
talking
gonna
about?
take a longer time, sorry.
2 minutes and 14 seconds, we're still wasting time.
Okay. All right. So this year, we're going, right now, as of right now, we have, including the charter articles, we have 36, 36 articles to vote on, our town meeting has. So
Painful.
Article 1, you know, our standard here town reports. Right now, we don't have anything lined up. Article 2 is transfer to the OPEB trust. If you remember, each year, we budget for the OPEB liability for any new employee that we bring on. So this is transferring that funding from the budget to the OPEB trust.
Does Ron have it? Because I'll show
Yes,
it.
yeah, sure.
I'll
Sure,
show
sorry.
Joe.
Thanks.
This was in your folders, right, I think?
So, Article 3 would be the a transfer from the sped stabilization account. We received notice from the school that they are going to need $175,000 from the sped stabilization account to help balance their budget at the end of the year. And actually, I think this is the first time we have requested a withdrawal from it since since it was established like 3 years ago. Yeah, and I think this worked exactly the way it was supposed to work, because I think there was somebody who, you know, moved into district and not budgeted for it, made a
And that's what that
difference.
fee is for,
Right.
I'm assuming. Yep.
So, so the next article would be the fiscal year 2019 budget. Again, we've talked about that. We'll talk more about that in the future. The next article will be the capital plan and the authorization for that capital plan. Again, Jennifer, Jen, and Brittany will be presenting that next week, or in the next couple of weeks, the next meeting, I should say.
Yep.
Next article is our annual revolving funds, which you know, authorize spending caps and where the revenue comes from. Next article is your annual consent article. Next article will be it's an annual authorization article. Again, these are typically standard. Then we start moving into the CPC articles, if we stay in this order. First one is the CPA annual consent, what they call the annual consent article, which contains the appropriations into the different buckets, and then also the appropriations for the bond payments, for 3 different bond payments that we've incurred over the last few years. Next article would be to appropriate CPC funds for the purchase of 133 West Union Street, which is also known as the Valentine Estate, something that we have been talking about. The next article is funding to reconstruct and renovate the 133 West Union Street property. That is really more to appropriate the funds to fix the envelope of both the barn and the building, so it doesn't deteriorate any further.
Will they have some kind of funding available for us to look at that and vote on that? I mean, as to a dollar amount?
Like an
Before-
estimate?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they, before CPC can even vote on it, they have to get an estimate, and so we're working on that right now.
And does it make sense to do that before we've had a discussion as a community as to? what
Well,
we're
it's
gonna
just
use?
to,
So do the outside
envelope,
to make
essentially.
sure,
The
okay.
roof, all that good stuff.
Okay.
The next would be appropriating CPC funds, and it would be affordable housing funds to purchase the affordability restrictions at 128 Main Street. We can talk more about this specific project when we get to the development agreement part of the agenda, but it would need an appropriation from CPC. The next article is a CPC article to fund some improvements at Stone Park, replacing the benches, replacing some of the dugouts and, you know, the fixtures there.
Any funding related to a skate park for there, or that was not
No, that was not,
discussed?
that was not
How did
discussed.
these come about, Michael? Are these come from the CPC, or certain people applied, or?
Yeah, DPW.
This particular one?
Specifically. What CPC has done is they've tried to do a little bit more active solicitation
Yeah, they
for
had a-
projects.
They had a public
They
hearings.
had some
and stuff.
hearings on that, okay, and they got some, okay.
Next is, we have on here, although I'm not necessarily sure it's going to go forward, it's amending Chapter 153 of the Town of Ashland bylaws, which would be the Town Forest Committee and the
Yeah.
regulations, the bylaws surrounding the town forest. If you remember last town meeting, they had proposed something. and-
tabled that.
Yeah,
They
and
pulled
there
it.
was, yeah, there was
What was
some-
that about again? Well,
there was a number of different changes that they had, and, I think the public was supportive of the idea of making some changes, just thought the specific changes needed to be fleshed out a little bit.
Yeah.
So, next article is the purchase of land at 133 West Union Street. Again, the Valentine Estate. This is the borrowing authority, and then also talking about the debt exclusion, which actually you will need to be doing the ballot votes at the next selectmen's meeting.
Okay,
Actually.
the language
So,
for all the ballot
yeah.
questions.
The next article, again related to 133 West Union Street, we said that there are going to be several articles related to it. This is the restrictive covenant with the Hicks family, which is an abutting property for 133 West Union Street. Next article is a general bylaw that prohibits recreational marijuana in the town of Ashland. This is consistent with what will be on the vote at the town election on May 15th. You do need to have a bylaw change in addition to a successful ballot vote to successfully prohibit recreational marijuana dispensaries. Next article would...
Can I just, so we think this is the final wording, and do we get the ballot wording with this as well, or how's that going?
We do have drafts of the ballot wording.
That's
I do
for next
believe
meeting, okay.
this. I don't know if there's going to be anything else added to this, Rob. If it is, it's probably the language from the ballot. The ballot question would be inserted there.
How does this, well, I won't get into the discussion, it just says public consumption, and then we talk about any private land. How does that fall into this?
No,
No.
there's nothing about private land.
Sure it does. This is
Where?
under public consumption. Have access, invitees, or licenses any park, playground, or any private land.
Yeah.
Oh,
Of the owner, place or building to which members of the public have access as invitees or licensees, or any park or playground or any, yeah, I think that'll be, we should probably go ahead and get that.
Yeah, that should be looked
Yeah.
at, because
yeah,
that's,
because that's not
no,
good for pointing that out, Jeff.
once in a while.
Every now and then. So, next article would be related to the school feasibility study and the MSBA process. So that would be appropriating, borrowing and appropriating the $1 million to do the feasibility study for replacement of the Menda School. Next article would be the MBTA access road, the road acceptance. The next article would be the authorization to create a business incentive program. This is something that Beth and I have been working on. We've been trying to work with a local bank to, put some things together. But essentially what this will be is it will be a home rule petition that will allow us to establish a business incentive program to, number one, incentivize owners and landowners and retailers and other businesses to improve their streetscape and improve their landscaping, whether through low-interest loans or grant type of programs. And then also to help with tenant fit-outs for businesses that we want to see here in town, specifically looking at restaurants and like professional services. So we'll have a more in-depth discussion and detailed presentation about this at the next meeting as well. So, next would be, there's several zoning articles. The first one is to site alteration special permit. It just cleans up a little bit of language and makes it consistent with state law, which is actually more stringent than what our current law says. If that's correct, right, Jen? Next one is remove office commerce zoning district from the bylaws and the map. Again, this is something that is cleanup related. The only place where this applies right now is 466 Chestnut Street, which, as we know, has already been developed. It's a lot of language to clean up.
Jeez, that is a lot, wow. This will take a night in itself. It will.
If people
Yeah.
read it and understand it
Understand it.
beforehand, it will help.
Right.
So we gotta try and help
Don't
them do
forget,
that.
don't forget, that's, yeah.
Try and
Wishful
help them
thinking.
do that.
Yeah, yeah, the hearing on some or all of these will actually be tomorrow night.
Yeah.
the
Oh,
planning-
tomorrow night?
Yeah,
much
that's
going
a good
on.
point, yeah.
Yeah, they've
Yeah,
got
they're
a
trying to do it a
big
little
agenda.
earlier than what
Yeah.
we've typically done it, so.
And how well has that been publicized?
I mean, the agenda has been published for a while. Yeah, noticed. So the next one is dimensional requirements for multiple principal uses. Next one is actually related to the MWRA connection, and it's amending the zoning map and the code to expand the, what's known as a groundwater protection overlay district. So there's certain restrictions that have to go in place where, you have this water infrastructure, and so this would apply to that.
Can I just, but it's not our groundwater we're using, so you said it was about the MWRA connection?
Yeah, so it's actually around, some of the infrastructure that would be.
Oh, to
that we're
protect in
using,
case
yeah.
water gets
Yeah.
into it somehow? I
Mhm.
guess I'm not sure. Okay.
It's on the south side of town.
Next is the zoning map reference. Again, this is all cleanup. Next one, required site plans and design plan review contents. This alters the language which requires a separate project narrative that includes a description of the proposed uses and a written summary of the site plan. Right now, we don't require that. We strongly advise an applicant to put that in, but they're not required to do that. So this makes that a requirement. And then we get into the charter changes. First would be basically it gives the Board of Selectmen the authority to petition the legislature to make these changes because they'll be done as a petition. So, the first article related to the charter is the one related to elected town officers. The next one is the recall of elected officers. Next one is the any changes to the town manager section of the charter. Next one is a change to the administrative organization of the charter. Next one would be financial provisions and making alterations to some of the financial language related to the charter. Next would be appointments and vacancies, changes in the charter. Then the next one would be general provisions. The next one would be transitional provisions. And then you have to do one that kind of adopts everything. Similar to like when we do the budget, we do all the line items, and then you do the budget at the very end, the whole bottom. So are there any questions, or there's a lot to...
But those are gonna be on
I'm
another
gonna
night.
ask
They're
you
not gonna be the
specific
same night,
questions
right?
offline about the water overlay, because
Yeah, that's a good
I
one.
don't know, but it's my neighborhood, and I wanna understand how it's gonna affect myself and my neighbors, and
I would ask Doug Small directly.
Okay.
So
Newcastle is not on
there's,
that.
yeah, there's a lot.
But many addresses on Prospect and Prospect Heights and Webster Road and
Yeah.
Elliott and
A good portion of the
a
south side
good
of town.
portion of that section,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
So any,
yeah, my question is about the marijuana. So what about the zoning?
so we're not,
Handling that?
so the marijuana zoning?
Well, didn't we decide in case it passed, or we didn't opt out, that we needed to have zoning?
Be the next step.
Yes, and so that's why
We
you have the
expanded.
moratorium until the end of December. So that gives you the opportunity to pass the zoning at the November town meeting.
Too late, because we won't have approved, right?
No, zoning, so zoning, once it's approved by the
Doesn't need to,
Attorney General, it's retroactive to the date that it was passed.
okay.
How about regulations, though? Because we'd also have to create licensing regulations and all of that.
Regulations would go into effect as soon as they're in place. They don't have to be approved by the Attorney General. If you're talking about the local
Local regulations, yeah.
regulations.
Okay.
All right, so, okay.
So,
Because I was wondering if there's another thing we could put in town meeting. We need another zoning.
yeah, so this is gonna be,
Well, the one thing I would, like, people should be evaluating, how critical are some of these, like, because we've got a long, long list here, and maybe some of this stuff could wait, that's all I'm suggesting in
I think
general.
some of them have been held off, right? Some of them
Yeah,
were supposed to be in the fall, and
yeah.
all right, so
Yeah, I
I'm just gonna
mean-
go under that assumption that people are putting stuff here because they really think we gotta do it.
Well, now, I mean, you've put off the stormwater,
Yep.
you know, there's several things that have
Okay.
we've put off some
been
other
put on.
things, yeah.
All right.
It's tough, you know, we've talked about this, and I think we've talked about it as a group, just the amount of stuff that we're trying to get done, you know, collectively, and just the flow of town meeting and the
Well,
way it works.
the charter certainly adds a whole nother element to
Right.
this, and
That's why
you
it's
know, I know
all
we've dedicated a single night for
Right.
the charter, but, you know, it's still, it's an extensive.
Even without the charter, you
Town
still have
warrant.
26.
So can you just reiterate the dates and the expectation of what will be happening each night for
Sure.
town meeting?
So May 2nd is the first night of town meeting. So we'll go through as many articles as we can get through that night, besides the charter-related articles, okay? May 8th is the second night of town meeting. That night is dedicated solely and strictly to the charter articles. The moderator has indicated, you know, he doesn't care if it takes us till 11 p.m. or 11 a.m. the next day. We're not leaving until
Charter is done.
those charter stuff is done.
So we tell me start at 5?
No, I think 7 p.m.
My word.
So,
Maybe he's not leaving it.
I know.
Yeah.
And then if there are any articles remaining from the first night, we'll have a third night of town meeting on May 10th, which is a Thursday. Again, all of these are at the auditorium at the high school.
Okay. Motion to,
Okay.
any other
keep
further
going.
discussion?
Motion to keep going.
I think
All
we
right,
got two
thank
more
you.
things,
Two more
right?
things.
Yes.
Okay. Next is the development agreement with 128 Main Street. I just, you know, want to, if I haven't been able to catch it before the meeting, not expecting a vote tonight, but I thought it would be important to start laying it out here because this is going to require a vote at town meeting of CPC funds. Just to give you some history on the project, 128 Main Street, the proposed developer, local resident Carlos Hanzi, went to the planning board, not for a formal site plan review, but to get feedback on a potential application for a site plan for a new development at 128 Main Street. He basically, you know, he and the planning board went back through several iterations. What ended up coming out of that, those deliberations were a 15-unit building, apartment building with retail on the ground floor equal to 2,000 square feet. You know, I think the planning board, some members of the planning board struggled with the project as it was and as they, you know, gave approval to, and I'm not saying formal approval to. I think some members of the public had some concerns with the size of the building and just, you know, among some parking considerations. So there was an idea, you know, how could we make this better? So, you know, a few of us put our heads together and we thought that we could creatively use affordable housing money to make this a better project in general. And this is something I think I've talked about to the board before, just in general, the possibility of, you know, you can use, the best way to use any kind of funding is using it to leverage, you know, other sources of revenue as well and other projects and other things to make this a better project. So that's what we tried to do. What we ended up as a plan is one for, initially when we kind of came to a conclusion, it was 12 units. 2 units were cut off the back. A ground floor unit, ADA accessible unit, was converted to commercial space. So what you ended up with was 12 units and 3,000 square feet of commercial space. And the way that we would make that work and the way it would work financially for the developer is that we would actually end up buying the affordability restriction for 3 of the units. So we would actually make 3 of the units affordable, which would then allow us to count all 12 units towards our subsidized housing inventory. And then the board would waive, we would approach the board to waive the fees, the building permit fees, and then also the water and sewer connection fees. I don't know of a case where you have waived the building permit fees. As you know, you've waived, the water sewer connection fees in other development agreements.
Why would we want to do that now? We were already giving him a potential $505,000 for the CPC funding, which would help us in adding to our allotment. Why would we want to do that? I mean, it seems like we're really bending over backwards for this individual to get this done. I mean, I've never seen anybody, well, I don't know any other developer that we have done this for. I mean, unless we have, and I just don't recall. But I just think we're leaving a lot of money on the table, and this guy is, and I understand he's a resident in town, so on and so forth, but at the same token, he's out here to make money, and we're giving him money so he can make money. I just, how does that work? I'm sorry, I just have a problem with that.
Well, I mean, he can go back and he can just do his 15-unit project.
Well, he can do that.
So you're losing so he's losing 3 units.
It sounds like he's putting us in a corner, to be very honest with you. I don't like being put in a corner when it comes to negotiations. That's not how you negotiate. That's just my opinion. I mean, I read this over twice, and that's why I started writing these things down, because I'm saying, okay, we're reducing these fees. For what purpose? We're eliminating the building fees and the water and the water and sewer connection fees.
Well, why are we offering that? You think to make the deal work? Is that?
Yeah. It's economics. It's simple economics.
He's given up certain
Yeah.
residential units, and this is what we're offering him in exchange.
Yeah, I mean, we
decide if it's a good enough deal.
We did the math, and so if you look at the residential units that he would be giving up and the rent associated with those, it's like well over $1 million. So, he would be, there's.
Over what time span?
It's like a 20-year time span.
So that's why the perpetuity was removed out of the contract, because after that 20 years, it'll.
Well, yeah, but I have an issue with that too. So,
Okay, well, so don't I. That's why I questioned it.
And keep in mind, this draft that Michael got back is a draft that you just got back a day or 2 ago.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And so we
Yeah,
haven't
okay.
agreed to this yet.
Oh, okay.
Neither has he.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No, that's okay.
Question, but I'm just, after reading this, that's what I'm.
Yeah, but
concerned
still,
about.
I mean, if, I think we just have to get a general consensus here. I mean, if you want to have less density, which it sounded like the town as a whole wanted, is you wanted a less dense building, a smaller building, and a smaller project than what he can build for, there has to be some kind of meeting in the middle for the economics to work. And so that would require us contributing some, meaning the town, and it would require him foregoing some as well. I don't have to do that. We spent a lot of time on this, and I would rather not spend my time on this if people are not going to be supportive of it. But I will say this would be the only time where we have created affordable housing using CPA affordable housing money. It's the only time we've created it.
Okay,
So,
in addition to that, the third paragraph where it says that there is an agreement to purchase the premises, is there any documentation showing that agreement in full, including the language?
yeah, so let's talk about what we have, the concerns that we have
Okay.
with this, the way it is. So what they came back with is they felt like if they removed the residential unit at the on the ground floor, they would have to do an elevator.
I was just gonna ask that, about the ADA, okay.
So what they wanted to do is they wanted to convert that back to a residential unit, make it a little bit smaller, and so there would be a compromise. So the square footage of the commercial space would be 2,200 square feet, and the apartment on the bottom would be 800 square feet. And so, but that would mean 13 units of residential housing. You'd be back to 13 units. And so 3 is not 25% of 13. So you can't count all 13 units towards your affordable housing.
We'd have to get them to give us 4.
Yes, and he would be willing to eat the affordability restriction himself for that 4th unit. So we wouldn't, CPC funds wouldn't be appropriated for it.
Okay.
So we wouldn't look to increase our CPC
No.
funds
No.
for affordable housing, but we'd get 4 units
Correct.
versus the 3.
And all 13 would count towards the
And
SHI.
then,
So,
in regards, sorry, Joe,
No.
in regards to the retail space, then, does he feel that that is something that is leasable, that someone would look for that space?
Yes, and Beth and I.
Because that's an issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to create that kind of space, but as we're seeing with 21 Main, no one's jumping up and down to get into the other space. One,
Right.
one space is gonna be used, but not the other.
So what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to, get that essentially pre-leased before it's
Okay.
built. More desirable places for commercial development, they
Do
don't
that.
have an issue of,
Right.
people are looking to get in. So, Beth and I have been working on, there's a couple of different companies that we have talked to about that. And one specifically is scalable, whether it's 3,000 square feet, 2,200 square feet, or 2,000. The other issue, they wanted the affordability restriction to be for 20 years. I still think perpetuity. I know, the payment is for a 20-year period, so I can understand why they would want to come back with this, but I still think perpetuity is and it might be required under CPA, actually.
Right.
That's
Right.
another point.
yeah.
This makes it incumbent upon them to do the affordable housing lottery
Right.
and to do the monitoring, which is, there's a cost associated with that. They would only get the money upon the recording of the affordable housing restriction. No occupancy permit would be issued until that is done. So there are also a couple of things that have come up. So one, there's a question of the whole elevator and whether or not the developer needs an elevator or a ramp, even if there is an affordable or an ADA accessible unit on the ground. So we have to get some clarification from their architects and the Architectural Access Board. Number 2,
Is there an elevator in 21 Main?
no, there is
No,
not.
It's all stairs.
No, there is not.
Depends who you talk to.
So,
Depends who you talk to.
that's who you talk to.
Is it a dumb waiter?
Yeah. So the next is we need to have a pro forma. I think CPC definitely has to have a pro forma. I think the board, the building permit fees are gonna be like 25,000. I don't know yet exactly what, but
That's
if you're gonna
my
be
next
making
question,
that.
If we can get those figures, so we know what we're.
What we're giving up.
And that
Right,
makes
that's why I
Joe's
mentioned-
argument either make sense or not make sense, because it's hard to make these decisions without a pro forma.
Yeah, so,
That'd be good.
and then third and final is, my understanding is there's, and I think all of your understanding, is that there is a long-term lease involved in the current arrangement with 128 Main Street, and similar to what we did with DePietri in ensuring that we have evidence of his release from his agreement, we should probably require evidence that upon execution of the purchase and sale for 128 Main Street, that obligation is taken care of. So, is that good?
And then,
Yes, because I
Not
just
some-
don't want to see us hanging out in the loop.
not so much just this agreement, but as people have been hearing about this, there's been the discussion of, we're talking about what we want in downtown, so are we putting the cart before the horse in putting this agreement in place and then determining what we want downtown to look like? And I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know that I believe that, but it's been said to me, so I just wanted to get it out there that people have that concern.
Yeah, I think some people have.
Some, yeah.
There
And,
was- Can I speak?
Yes.
We had a discussion about this in executive session, about this property. And that's where these negotiations came from, that discussion. And it spoke to that point of what's appropriate downtown. The problem with this proposal, similar but not as far along as the Valentine, is it was already in the pipeline. And
Right.
so we did start these negotiations, and Michael did make some overtures of other options, and they weren't accepted.
yeah.
And so they continued to pursue this option.
Right. And I think so everybody can agree on the fact that we want a more vibrant downtown, right? And we want more commercial downtown. But right now, as we've heard from economists, I'll get it right. It is 10:30. Whether it was Judy Barrett like 7 years ago to the TAP, last December. Right now, the way Ashland is that you need to have the residential component to make the commercial viable. So there's not a big demand for commercial space of a high caliber like what people were talking about. So you have to have the residential to help. Help subsidize
I
that.
just
Yeah.
wanted to put it out there, because, to Carl's point, yes, we've had some of these discussions as part of our executive session, but it's that people understand, who are watching or listening, that we're aware of what the community is thinking. We're just trying to
Well, I
bring
think that
things
we're all
together.
sensitive to the fact that that's a critical point in talking about downtown.
Right.
And if we get it wrong,
Right.
we're kind of stuck with it,
Right.
so.
Like 128 Main period, like the,
The
The
location
location?
of the lot is
Yeah.
critical.
yeah. And that's why I think the footprint was a little bit scary for some people. And so by shrinking it, you can actually make it aesthetically more pleasing, but you also handle some of the practical aspects of parking and
Yeah.
things like that. So,
And the next door neighbor with its daycare there. I think that was one of the concerns as well, with the parking aspect of it.
So, that it for the update on that? So, moving ahead?
keep going.
Keep
Okay.
going, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Just quickly,
Keep going.
where does this go from here? Do we have to have an amended version of this at our next meeting to consider?
yes, I hope to have for your next meeting, this worked out, and so a finalized version for your vote and signature. And then also, the information that we've requested, evidence of the release, and then the pro forma. So I think that's
Okay.
fair.
Thank you.
All right,
That's
thank
fair
you,
enough.
Michael.
That's fair with me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, next item is your town manager evaluation
And I
Process. Okay,
process.
Okay.
that's what it says, town manager
Arduous
evaluation
process.
process.
It is, believe it or not, this almost slipped off the radar screen. But it's that time of year, and so it's time for my annual evaluation. We're all looking forward to it. What I've done is I've tried to lay out a timeline for your, well, I can't even remember what I'm gonna say now. It's really late. at night.
For our review, yes.
For our
So
review.
we're
Timeline
using
for
the
your
same,
review.
Form that we've been using,
So
correct?
using the same form,
Okay.
again, I will do, a self-evaluation. So this is the timeline that I would propose to you for your consideration. So this week, I will get you my self-evaluation. So I'll get that to you by the weekend, and then also the evaluation form. Next week, you will use that week to initially fill out the form and then send it to me. And then the following week, that's the week of April 2nd, I can meet with you individually and we can go through the,
Don't we send them to the chair?
you do
Our
this,
filled out evaluation forms?
it's coming,
After you do the interview.
after you do the
Let
discussion.
them finish and.
So after filling out the forms, we meet individually to discuss the evaluation. After we review it, you have the opportunity to make any adjustments that you want to on the evaluation. Then you send it to the chairman, which is the week of April 9th. The chair collates the individual scores into the comprehensive evaluation and drafts the statement to be released at the next Board of Selectmen's meeting. The board chairman would then send the statement to review by board members and town manager on April 16th. Any feedback must be received by April 18th, and then the evaluation and statement is discussed at the April 18th date.
Wow.
Is this,
You're
is it a
very,
little too much?
It's very
for you?
lot of marks to hit there.
I mean, if you don't feel, I mean, obviously I want you to take as much time with this one as you need, so.
The thing is, we have to get it done before town meeting and elections, just in case we're not sitting here.
So,
I mean, hopefully that's not the case, but.
So again, one more time, the week of 3/26 will be our,
I do, I'll send it, I'll send it.
so the week of 3/26 is our evaluation form. We'll fill out the form
And then send it,
and
yeah.
send it, and then the week of April 2nd, we will have an opportunity to interview, sit and
Our
interview.
our individual.
Individual
executives.
discussions, and then the week of the 9th, we will then collate and send to the chair. Is that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
he has a week to,
And draft statement for the
Yep.
April.
Yeah. Okay.
And we'll see the statement before you,
Yeah, so that's,
by the 16th, we'll see the statement.
right. And then you have an opportunity to make any kind of adjustments or changes to it.
Okay.
So,
Just in terms of the statement to be released, so the scores is just like putting the scores together. Draft statement, so let's just talk conceptually about that, because I'll be getting, 5 different kind of, and some will be similar, some won't, but I'm just trying to remember what, I think, was it Joe, were you the last one? Who did it last?
Joe did.
Joe,
Joe,
yeah.
yeah. So so I'm gonna get a bunch of different statements, or maybe they're similar. What, the idea is I'm gonna try to summarize them into some
So
kind
there's
of.
two different ways that it's been done. So when Joe did it last year, he actually wrote a statement taking all the information. Years before that, when we did it, on the form, we put together this, so when you looked at each section, you took the comments from different people and actually put them on the form.
Yeah, so.
And
you had a
instead of
whole
writing,
collection.
when I did it for the 2 years, instead of writing the statement on the form under things to work on and things that need to be, that he's doing, that were being done well, I just took the statements from the various members, rather than putting it in my own words. I
Yeah.
used the actual wording from the different members, so that if there was a point where someone said, I felt he did this, and someone else was opposite, both of those might have been on the form.
Yeah,
So
what are people's thinking on that, or just,
it was done.
so otherwise I try to summarize,
I
I
like the
guess.
summary. I thought that worked out nice last time, so. Your call.
Yeah, all right, so I'll look at
Okay.
that and see what. Okay,
maybe that meeting will get snowed out.
there you go.
tell you what, if it
Better
snows
not
out
be on
on the
April
28th,
18th.
I'll tell you right now, we're in a world of hurt, brother.
Better not be
The home
snowing
stretch
on
We're
Okay.
really in a world of hurt.
Any other questions about this challenging process?
Nope.
No,
You'll
Challenging
email,
process.
but you'll email us
email
those dates and stuff,
Yeah,
thank you,
the whole-
and the form.
and the form.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so I believe that's the last item. That gets us to board reports.
It
So-
does, doesn't it?
We can
Night,
go.
Jen. Thank you.
Night, Jen.
Good night,
Drive
Jen.
carefully, kiddo.
Yeah, okay, so we'll start with Mr. Mignani.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a few things, I'm just trying to quickly find them.
Time's up.
Time's up, yeah.
Oh, we gotta get the clock here, Joe. Huh? He comes around.
I got it, it's all right, we got it right here.
No, we are
No,
not
we're
going past 11.
Not going past 11. Just a couple of quick things. Last night, we were all in attendance to a wonderful ceremony, which honored Mary Mortensen. The Board of Health had that wonderful ceremony, which Eddie Hart, and I'll use his name, Eddie, for his accomplishments and his contributions to the town. John Featherston did a very nice job in his explanation as to what the award was all about and who received it and why he received it. And kudos to Ed for all the work that he's done, and to Mary for everything that she has done. And again, I've known her for a number of years. I worked with her, and she was a fine person, and she was a lot of fun to be with. So I think that was a very deserving award in her name and in her honor. Quick thing, on April 11th, the Friends of the Ashland Council on Aging having their annual buffet and auction. Starts at 5:30, and you can buy tickets at the door. And this is one of their big fundraisers, and it's always a good take. So if you have nothing to do on the 11th of April, come on down to the VFW.
Is that the VFW this
Yeah,
year?
it's at the VFW. Yep.
Okay.
And it's the buffet's being catered by Marconi's. So
And they
it'll be
purposely did it on the 11th so that it's not a Board of Selectmen meeting.
That's
night.
correct. That's correct, because they want to see us
Because
there.
typically it has been.
That's very true. And just to let you all know that the 2018 Boston Marathon Military Relay application, it was for anybody who is in the military commemorating the 100th anniversary of the 1918 Military Relay. And we have a couple of representatives. I know one representative that I'm kind of glad is doing it, and he's a former classmate of mine and Carl's. His father was a coach in Babe Ruth, and that's Nathan Moran. His father, Chris, was a military man, a career man in the Navy, and Nathan took up his father's part as being in the military. Graduated from Westport in high honors. He's in the Ranger program. Just came back from, he was in Afghanistan, he went to Africa. Can't talk too much about what he was doing over there, but needless to say, he's back safe and sound, and he will be running that leg in honor of, in Ashland, on the Ashland Lake. So, Nathan, we look forward to seeing you on the 16th.
Very cool.
So, yeah, which is cool. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yolanda?
I have two things. The first is Ghostlight Players out of Marlborough are doing a performance this weekend called Summer and Smoke. But 3 Ashland residents who people might have seen in Ashland Community Theater performances are participating in that performance. It should be very good. The performances are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon, and you can just go to Ghostlight Players, I believe it's .com, or just Google Ghostlight Players. The second thing is on Wednesday afternoon, April 4th, there's going to be a blood drive at the Ashland High School. The Red Cross is doing it, and it is in support of Jake Silva. He's a young gentleman in town who has been fighting, and I'm not going to say it right, a form of cancer, has had many blood transfusions. So in support of him, they are doing a blood drive here in Ashland. And again, that's April 4th. And you can go through Red Cross to sign up for an appointment, and you put Ashland High School, I believe, Ashland HS, to let them know where you want to do your blood drive that day. And that's it.
Steve?
He has a lot.
Just a couple of things.
Just a
No,
couple.
actually, they're short. So again, I want to also score what Joe said about Ed Hart last night. And I just wanted to wish Ed and Janet, they celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary last night as well. So it was a double whammy, and so congratulations. As I told Ed last night, he's still a few years away from catching up to Bonnie and I. So,
You guys?
you had to do that. Huh?
Well, you're the one who brought it
If
up.
she's watching, I'm gonna say 43. So.
Wow.
Yeah. All right, so that, got that out of the way. Just want to, our BAA grant spring round has been completed. We've got a fair amount of applications, and I would anticipate, Rob and I will get together at some point. We'll communicate and work that out. But I would anticipate we'd be ready to announce the grants on the 18th, that meeting. So we might want to just put a placeholder for April 18th for the grant award announcements. Two things that we need to act on, I think. We have scholarships that we give to
High school
to
students.
high school students, so we need to get that process in place. I was somewhere today, one of the stores, and I overheard kids talking about upcoming graduation, so it's coming fast.
Yep.
We need to get our applications ready, and I'm not sure, Susan, if you can check out what their process is, when do they need our stuff?
So Christina Hunter, who handles all of the scholarships at Ashland High School, I don't know about the other schools, reached out to all of the different groups, asking them if their applications were ready. So as soon as you guys give me the go, I'm just gonna change the dates and I'll send it off. And then, similar to last year, we'll have it due in the middle of May, so it'll give them about a month to get it in.
Okay.
So in the past, we've done two, one for a boy, one for a girl, $1,500. If you wanna keep it the same, I will keep the application the same. If you're looking to change something, let me know and I can make the change.
Board,
I recommend
discussion?
we keep it the same.
Do we need a motion? Should we do this right now? Do you just?
Well, we
need
have
me-
to authorize the money from our
From the gift account.
so.
But you can certainly
can-
do that when you do the awards. Right now, it's
Right.
just to send out the applications.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I don't know
get
that
it-
we need
get
a
it
motion,
done
I
at
said,
that
go ahead and
point.
send
But
them
I think,
out.
I think we're ready to authorize you to
Absolutely.
do that. so.
We also have another action we need to consider, and the board hosts the Runners Breakfast on,
Yeah.
this year on April the 14th, Saturday. So we're gonna need to authorize Susan to work with TJ's. And also, again, we can do the funding part of it maybe on the 4th,
Fourth, yeah,
right?
that
And we
makes
can do it
sense.
that way, so we
Yep.
need to get that in motion.
Yep.
And then our selectmen's recognition reception is in process. We have, we talked about April the 4th, starting at 6:15. We have, we're working on invitations. We've got most of the addresses for the living selectmen, and we'll send those out. The installation is gonna take place at some point between now and then. And what else did I leave out, Susan? Anything?
I think you got it all. Good
We
job.
got all that stuff?
that's a lot.
So that's really it, so,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Carl? Okay, oh, all right, thank you. Just two quick things. One is, remind folks that the Ashland Democratic Town Committee has their annual fundraiser this Sunday. It's called the Taste of Ashland. It's for relatively inexpensive amount of money. You get to sample a variety of local foods from local restaurants, along with, paired with wine at the VFW. That's at 5 o'clock, starts at 5 o'clock on Sunday, and tickets are available at the Ashland Democratic Town Committee website. So that's always a fun event.
That is coming up too.
Oh, and I just, I noticed last week that the Governor Baker's come out with a climate resiliency bond fund. I don't know if people saw that after all the storm damage for the coastal communities. So it did reference some funds available for inland communities, and we're facing our own kind of challenges here with flood control and the stormwater. So it would be good if we could try to look into that, the funding. So, and I did contact, Senator Spilka's office about the, possibility of using that kind of funding for our own needs as well. Because, with climate change, we're gonna be facing, our own kind of volatility with storms and floods and stormwater control. So that's something I think we should put on our radar screen, Okay, do
Sounds
I
good.
get a motion
Motion
to
to adjourn.
adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none.